20-year-old Elena Whitmore never imagined her father would sell her future to save his own skin. One phone call, one debt, one handshake with a man who controlled half the city's underworld, and suddenly her dreams of art school in Paris vanished, replaced by an engagement ring that felt more like a shackle. Adrian Volkov, 40 years old and ruthlessly powerful, now owned the contract to her life. But tonight, at their engagement party, Elena would discover something far more dangerous than being sold to a crime lord, the possibility that she might actually want to stay. If you're ready for a story of power, transformation, and unexpected partnership, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The champagne glasses caught the light like diamonds, each one held by hands that had never known a day of real work. Elena Whitmore stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the city's elite celebrate her imprisonment with $1,000 wine and practice smiles. Her engagement party. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She touched the emerald necklace at her throat, a gift from her future husband, delivered by courier that morning with no note, no warmth, just a velvet box that might as well have been a collar. The stones were cold against her skin, heavy with the weight of everything she'd lost in the past 72 hours. 3 days ago, she'd been reviewing her application to the Sorbonne, mentally planning which arrondissement she'd live in, which cafes she'd sketch in while the autumn light turned Paris golden. 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been whether her portfolio was strong enough, whether her French was good enough, whether she was brave enough to build a life on her own terms. Now she was engaged to a man she'd met exactly once. "You look beautiful, darling." Her mother materialized beside her, all silk and diamonds and desperate eyes. "Smile, people are watching." People were always watching. That was the price of being a Whitmore, of carrying a name that opened doors and attracted cameras and hid a rot so deep Elena hadn't known it existed until it swallowed her whole. "How much did he pay?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the string quartet's soft melody. Her mother's perfectly painted lips tightened. "Elena, how much was I worth? I'd like to know the exact figure. Was it enough to cover father's gambling debts, or was there also the matter of that real estate scandal, the one the newspapers are about to run?" "Lower your voice." Her mother's fingers wrapped around Elena's wrist, perfectly manicured nails pressing into soft skin. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Your father made a difficult decision to protect this family. He sold me. He saved us." Her mother's eyes were hard now, all pretense of maternal warmth evaporated. "Do you think you'd have your precious art school if we lost everything? Do you think anyone would want you once the Whitmore name became synonymous with scandal and bankruptcy? Adrian Volkov offered us a lifeline. You should be grateful." Grateful. Elena wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to throw her champagne glass over the terrace railing and watch it shatter on the manicured lawn below. Instead, she stood perfectly still, her spine straight, her face composed. She'd learned early that Whitmores didn't make scenes. They suffered elegantly, privately, behind closed doors where the cameras couldn't see. "When does he arrive?" Elena asked. "Soon." Her mother's grip loosened, satisfied that the rebellion had been contained. "And when he does, you will smile. You will be charming. You will make him believe this was your choice." "It wasn't. It doesn't matter. What matters is what people see, what they believe. The story we tell becomes the truth." Her mother smoothed an invisible wrinkle from Elena's cream-colored dress. "You'll understand someday. Sometimes we sacrifice our wants for the family's needs. That's what love is." She drifted away, back into the crowd of people who'd come to witness the spectacle, and Elena was alone again with her champagne and her rage, and the terrible understanding that no one was coming to save her. She'd have to save herself. But how? Her father controlled her trust fund, her mother controlled her reputation, and Adrian Volkov, a man she knew only through whispered rumors and newspaper photographs, now controlled her future. Elena had done her research in those frantic 72 hours. Late-night internet searches, old society pages, business journals that wrote about him in carefully neutral language because everyone knew what he really was, even if no one dared print it. Adrian Volkov, 40 years old, self-made empire, legitimate businesses on the surface, real estate, shipping, private security, And beneath it all, the kind of power that didn't appear in annual reports. He owned politicians. He owned judges. He owned pieces of the city that weren't supposed to be for sale. And now he owned her. The whispers started before she saw him. A ripple through the crowd, conversations pausing, heads turning toward the terrace entrance. Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs as the string quartet faltered for just a moment before resuming their melody. He was late to his own engagement party. Of course he was. Men like Adrian Volkov didn't arrive on time. They arrived when they chose to, and everyone else waited. Elena turned slowly, champagne glass steady in her hand, even though everything inside her was trembling. She'd seen photographs, but they hadn't prepared her for the reality of him. Adrian Volkov moved through the crowd like a shark through water, silent, powerful, aware of everything around him. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His face was too hard for that, carved from something unforgiving, with gray eyes that missed nothing and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile somewhere around age 12. He wore his tuxedo like armor. While other men at the party looked like they were playing dress-up in their father's clothes, Adrian looked like he'd been born in a suit, like formality was his natural state. Everything about him screamed control, power, danger. Their eyes met across the terrace. Elena had expected cruelty. She'd expected the cold assessment of property recently acquired. She'd expected him to look at her the way her father looked at investments, calculating value, measuring returns. Instead, she saw recognition, not attraction, not desire, but something far more unsettling. Adrian looked at her like he knew exactly what she was thinking, like he could see straight through the composed exterior to the fury and fear beneath, like he'd been expecting her rage and found it interesting. He crossed the terrace with her father at his side. Michael Whitmore looked diminished next to Adrian, his practiced politician smile not quite reaching his eyes, his hand gestures a little too eager. Elena's father was a big man, used to dominating rooms with his presence and his voice and his carefully cultivated network of power. Next to Adrian Volkov, he looked small. Elena. Her father's voice had that false warmth he used for donors and journalists. Come meet your fiancé properly. She wanted to refuse, wanted to turn and walk away, let him chase her if he wanted her so badly. But she could feel eyes on them. Hundreds of eyes, phones ready to capture any moment of drama, and she understood what her mother had meant. The story they told would become the truth. So Elena painted on a smile that felt like glass cutting her face and stepped forward. Adrian. Her father clapped the other man on the shoulder like they were old friends instead of what they really were, debtor and collector. This is my daughter Elena, though of course you two have met. Once. They'd met once, in her father's study 2 weeks ago, with Elena sitting numbly while contracts were discussed and her future was negotiated like a corporate merger. Adrian had looked at her then with the same unsettling intensity, and she'd looked back at him and thought, "This is the man who bought me." Elena. Adrian's voice was deep, controlled, with an accent that had been mostly smoothed away by years of expensive schools and careful practice. Just a trace remained, something Eastern European that surfaced on certain syllables. You look lovely. Thank you. Her voice was steady. Good. You're late. Surprise flickered across her father's face. Whitmore's didn't challenge, didn't question, but Adrian's expression didn't change. I was. He held her gaze. Business that couldn't wait. My apologies. There was no apology in his tone. He wasn't sorry. He was simply stating a fact, and the fact was that his time was more valuable than her engagement party. Than her. Elena felt something sharp and hot flood through her chest. She'd spent the last 3 days drowning in helplessness, choking on the weight of choices made without her consent. But standing here, face to face with the man who'd reduced her to a transaction, she found something she hadn't expected. Anger. Pure, clean, burning anger. How fortunate, she said sweetly, that you could fit us into your schedule at all. Her father made a small sound of warning, but Adrian's mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of a worthy opponent. Your father tells me you're interested in art. Adrian said it like he was making polite conversation at a dinner party, not discussing hobbies with the woman he'd essentially purchased. The Impressionists, specifically. I was planning to study in Paris, Elena kept her voice level. At the Sorbonne, before my plans changed. Plans change. Adrian accepted a champagne glass from a passing waiter without looking away from her. That's the nature of life. We adapt. Or we're forced to adapt. Is there a difference? Yes? Elena's fingers tightened on her glass. Choice. Something shifted in Adrian's eyes. Calculation, maybe, or assessment. He was trying to figure her out, she realized. Trying to understand what kind of wife he'd acquired. Docile or defiant. Broken or bent. Perhaps, Adrian said slowly, we should take a walk. The garden is lovely at night. It wasn't a suggestion. Her father was already nodding, already guiding them toward the terrace steps like a host ushering important guests to the best seats. The crowd parted, faces turning to watch the newly engaged couple take their first public stroll together. Performance. Everything was performance. Elena set down her champagne and took Adrian's offered arm. His sleeve was fine wool, expensive, and beneath it she could feel solid muscle. This was not a man who lived behind a desk. This was someone who'd built his empire with his own hands, who understood violence as intimately as he understood spreadsheets. They descended into the garden where paper lanterns cast everything in soft gold light. Behind them the party continued, laughter and music and the clink of glasses. But here among the roses and sculpted hedges, they were almost alone. Almost. Elena knew there would be security watching, cameras hidden in the landscaping. Her father wouldn't have brought Adrian Volkov here without ensuring every moment was documented. Every word could be reviewed. Evidence, insurance, leverage. Your father is afraid of me, Adrian said it casually, like commenting on the weather. Elena glanced at him. Most people are, I imagine. But not you. Wasn't a question. Elena stopped walking, turned to face him directly. Should I be? That depends. Adrian studied her with those two observant eyes. What do you think I am? A criminal, she said it flatly. A man who deals in things that don't appear in annual reports. Someone powerful enough that my father was willing to trade his daughter to avoid your displeasure. And that makes you angry. Wouldn't you be? If your entire future was decided without your consent? If you woke up one day and discovered you'd been sold? I wouldn't have allowed myself to be sold. Adrian's voice was quiet, but absolute. I would have fought, run, disappeared. Easy to say when you're not a 20-year-old woman with no money, no resources, and a family whose reputation you've been raised to protect. Elena felt her composure cracking, anger bleeding through. Easy to say when you're the one buying, not being bought. You're right. Adrian's agreement startled her. It is easy for me to say. I built my power. You had yours stripped away. He paused. I'm sorry for that. Elena laughed, bitter and sharp. Are you? Sorry enough to release me from this arrangement? No. The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. At least a lie would have pretended she mattered, that her wishes carried weight. This was just truth, brutal and clean. Why? Elena demanded. You could have anyone, women who would actually want to marry you, women who come from your world, who understand it. Why agree to this? Adrian was quiet for a moment, watching the lantern light play across the roses. When he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before. Not warmth exactly, but something close to respect. Your father came to me 6 weeks ago, desperate. The gambling debts were bad enough, but the real estate scandal, when that breaks, the Whitmore name will be worthless. He needed money immediately. He needed protection from the people he owed, and he needed someone powerful enough to make the story disappear. So you negotiated, Elena's voice was hollow, and I was part of the price. He offered you, Adrian corrected. I could have taken his businesses instead, his properties, his political connections, all of it. Why didn't you? Because I don't want a desperate, broken politician in my pocket. I want, he paused, choosing his words carefully, an alliance. Your family has legitimacy, connections that go back generations, access to circles I can't enter on my own, no matter how much money I have. And you, he turned to face her fully, you have something more valuable than any of that. What? Elena whispered. Intelligence. Fire. The ability to think clearly under pressure. Adrian's gaze was steady. In the past 72 hours, you could have fallen apart, could have run to the media, caused a scandal that would embarrass your family and complicate my life considerably. Instead, you researched me, learned everything publicly available about who I am and what I do. Attended this party with perfect composure. Even now, you're not crying or begging. You're negotiating. How did he know that? How did he know she'd spent 3 days searching his name, reading everything she could find, trying to understand the man who'd bought her future? I had to understand what I was facing, Elena said. Exactly. Adrian's mouth curved in something that was almost approval. You assessed the situation and gathered intelligence before making your move. That's what I do. That's how I survived this world. And it tells me you're stronger than your father knows, smarter than anyone in that party realizes. Strength doesn't matter when I'm trapped. You're not trapped. Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Read this. Elena took it carefully, unfolding thick, expensive paper covered in dense legal text. She scanned the paragraphs, her pulse quickening as she understood what she was seeing. Protections. Financial guarantees, escape clauses. Section 12, Adrian said quietly, establishes a trust in your name. $10 million. Accessible only by you, regardless of our marriage status. Section 18 gives you full legal authority to dissolve the marriage at any time, for any reason, with no financial penalty. Section 23 prevents me from controlling where you live, what you study, or how you spend your time. Elena read the words again, certain she was missing something. This wasn't a marriage contract. This was insurance, Adrian said. I don't want a prisoner, Elena. I don't want someone who stays because they have no choice. This marriage gives your family protection and gives me legitimacy, but it only works if you're actually willing to be here. And if I'm not? Elena looked up at him. If I take this money and leave tomorrow, then you leave. Adrian's voice was absolute. I won't stop you, won't pursue you. You'll have your freedom and enough money to study wherever you want. Paris, Florence, anywhere. It was too good, too easy. Elena's mind raced, looking for the trap, the hidden clause, the way this kindness would become a weapon later. Why would you give me that power? Because power that's given is stronger than power that's taken. Adrian stepped closer, and Elena caught the scent of expensive cologne and something underneath it, gunpowder maybe, or just the sharp edge of danger. If you stay, I need to know it's because you chose it, because you see value in what we could build together. Otherwise, this is just another prison, and I already have enough of those. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she refolded the contract. Her mind was spinning, recalculating everything she thought she understood. You're not what I expected. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Neither are you. Adrian's gaze held hers. I expected your father's daughter, polished and empty, trained to smile and stay quiet. Instead, I got someone who looks at me like they're planning where to hide the body. Despite everything, the fear, the anger, the sheer insanity of this situation, Elena felt her lips twitch. I haven't ruled it out. Good. Adrian's voice carried that almost approval again. I prefer partners who keep me honest. Partners. Elena tested the word. Is that what we'd be? If you stay, yes. I have enemies, Elena. Dangerous people who would love nothing more than to find a weakness they can exploit. Anyone close to me becomes a target. I won't lie to you about that. This life, my life, it's not safe, it's not simple, and it requires trust between people who have very good reasons not to trust anyone. You're asking me to trust you, Elena said slowly. But you bought me from my father like property. No, your father offered you as payment for protection I was already providing. I accepted because I saw an opportunity for an alliance that benefits both of us. Adrian's voice was patient, like he was explaining a complex business deal. But I won't pretend this situation is fair. You were given no choice in the beginning, so I'm giving you one now. Stay and build something with me, or take the money and build your own life elsewhere. Either way, you're free. Elena looked down at the contract in her hands, then back up at Adrian's face. He was watching her with that same intense focus, waiting for her decision. 3 days ago, her biggest concern was getting into art school. Now she was standing in a garden with a crime lord who'd just offered her both freedom and partnership, and she had no idea which one she wanted. "I need time," Elena said finally, "to think, to understand what this really means." "You have it," Adrian gestured back toward the party. "The engagement is public now. That serves its purpose regardless of what you decide. Take your time. Read the contract thoroughly. Ask questions. And when you're ready, tell me your choice." He started walking back toward the terrace, clearly expecting her to follow. Elena stayed where she was for a moment, trying to process the conversation they'd just had. This man had just given her an exit, had handed her enough money to disappear, enough legal protection to walk away free. Why? What game was he playing? Unless it wasn't a game. Unless he meant exactly what he said. Elena followed Adrian back to the party, her mind racing. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and champagne and careful smiles. Elena played her part perfectly, standing beside Adrian as guests congratulated them, as cameras flashed, as her mother watched with tight-lipped satisfaction. But everything had shifted. Every time someone called her Adrian's fiancé, she thought about that contract in her clutch. Every time she felt trapped, she remembered. She could leave. Right now, tonight, she could walk away. And yet, she stayed. "You're thinking too hard." Adrian's voice was low, meant only for her as they stood accepting congratulations from a city councilman and his wife. "I can see the calculations running. I'm deciding if you're the lesser evil or just better at hiding the truth." Elena kept her smile fixed. "Maybe both." Adrian's hand rested lightly at her lower back, a touch that looked possessive but felt oddly steadying. "The world isn't divided into good and evil, Elena. Just various shades of gray, and which ones you can live with." The party finally ended near midnight. Guests departed in chauffeured cars, calling final congratulations, already composing social media posts about the event. Elena's parents approached as the last stragglers filtered out. "Wonderful evening." Her father was slightly drunk, expansive with relief. "Absolutely wonderful. Adrian, thank you for... We're leaving." Adrian cut through the gratitude smoothly. "Elena will collect her things from your house tomorrow. She'll be staying with me from now on." Elena's mother stiffened. "That's not appropriate. They're not married yet." "The engagement is public. The arrangement is sealed. Whether she sleeps under your roof or mine changes nothing." Adrian's voice was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Elena?" he was asking, giving her the choice even in this small thing. She could refuse, could demand to stay in her childhood bedroom for whatever weeks remained before the wedding. Her parents would support it, anything to maintain the appearance of propriety. But Elena looked at her father, at the man who'd sold her future for his political survival, and made her decision. "I'll get my things tomorrow." She met her mother's shocked gaze. "Tonight, I'm going with Adrian." The drive to Adrian's home was quiet. He dismissed his driver, choosing to operate the sleek black car himself. Elena watched the city lights slide past her window and wondered what kind of life she was driving toward. They left the manicured streets of her parents' neighborhood, wound through downtown where late-night bars were still glowing, and headed toward the coast. The road climbed steadily, becoming narrower and more isolated until finally they turned through gates that opened silently at their approach. Elena caught her breath. Adrian's house wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into the clifftop. All glass and steel and stone, cantilevered over the ocean with lights that made it glow against the darkness. It was beautiful and intimidating, like everything else about him. "Welcome home," Adrian said it simply, like she'd always belonged here. He guided her inside through rooms that were more museum than residence. Everything was perfect, expensive, untouched. No photographs, no personal items, nothing that spoke of the man who lived here. "The guest wing is this way." Adrian led her down a hallway lined with original artwork, pieces Elena recognized from her art history classes, paintings that belonged in galleries, not private homes. "You'll have complete privacy. My rooms are in the opposite wing." He opened a door to reveal a suite that was larger than her entire apartment at school. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean. The furniture was elegant and impersonal, hotel quality. "There's clothing in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom. I took the liberty of having some things prepared." Adrian stood in the doorway, not entering her space. If you need anything, there's a phone on the nightstand. Security is posted throughout the property, but they won't disturb you. Adrian. Elena turned to face him. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow we talk. You read the full contract. You ask every question you need to ask, and you make your choice. He paused. But tonight, you're safe. I promise you that. He closed the door quietly, leaving Elena alone in this beautiful, impersonal space. She walked to the windows, pressed her forehead against the cool glass, and looked out at the ocean below. Somewhere out there was Paris, Florence, all the dreams she'd built for herself. And here was, what? A different kind of future? A partnership with a dangerous man who'd somehow seen through her anger to something he called strength? Elena pulled out the contract and began to read. She read through the night, reviewing every clause, every protection, every guarantee. As dawn began to paint the ocean pink and gold, she understood something her parents had never taught her. Power wasn't about control, it was about choice. And Adrian Volkov had just given her the only choice that mattered, the power to decide her own fate. The question was, what would she choose? Elena woke to the sound of waves crashing against cliffs and sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her apartment near campus, that the past week had been nothing but a nightmare born of too much stress and too little sleep. Then she saw the ocean stretching to the horizon, the contract papers scattered across the bed where she'd finally fallen asleep reading them, and remembered. She was in Adrian Volkov's home, by choice, technically, though the word felt slippery and strange in her mind. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Whitmore? A woman's voice, accented and professional. I've brought breakfast. May I enter? Elena pulled the silk robe she'd found in the closet tighter around herself. Yes. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, carrying a tray that smelled like coffee and fresh pastries. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent years in service, setting the tray on the table by the window without making a sound. I'm Irina. The woman's smile was warm, but her eyes were assessing, taking Elena's measure. I manage the household. Mr. Volkov asked me to ensure you have everything you need. Thank you. Elena sat down, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten at the party, too nervous to do more than hold a champagne glass. This looks wonderful. There's fruit, pastries, eggs if you prefer them, coffee and tea. Irina gestured to each item. Your belongings from your parents' house will arrive this afternoon. I've prepared space in the closet, but if you need anything else... Irina, Elena interrupted gently. How long have you worked for Adrian? The older woman's expression shifted, becoming guarded. 15 years, miss. Then you know what he is, what he does. I know, Mr. Volkov is a good employer who pays well and protects those who work for him. Irina's voice was careful. I know he has given me and my family opportunities we would never have had otherwise. Beyond that, it's not my place to say. Loyalty. Even the household staff were loyal to him. Elena wondered what that said about Adrian, that he inspired such devotion from people who surely knew exactly what kind of empire they served. Where is he? Elena asked. His study. He has calls scheduled throughout the morning. Irina moved toward the door. He asked that you join him when you're ready. No rush. When Elena was alone again, she ate slowly, watching the ocean and trying to organize her thoughts. The contract had been real. Every protection, every escape clause, every guarantee exactly as Adrian had described. Her lawyer brain, the part of her that had been considering law school before settling on art, had searched for loopholes and found none. If she wanted to leave, she could. Today, tomorrow, any day. So why was she still here? Elena showered in the marble bathroom, dressed in the clothes that had been provided, expensive, perfectly her size, chosen by someone with excellent taste, and made her way through the house following Irina's directions. Adrian's study was at the far end of the main wing, behind a door that was slightly ajar. Elena could hear his voice before she saw him, speaking in rapid Russian to someone on the phone. She'd taken 2 years of Russian in high school, enough to catch fragments, something about shipping schedules and customs inspections and payments that needed to be expedited. She knocked softly. The Russian stopped mid-sentence. "Hold," Adrian said into the phone, then switched to English. "Come in." His study was the first room she'd seen that actually looked lived in. Books lined two walls, some in English, some in Russian, some in languages Elena didn't recognize. Papers covered the massive desk. Multiple computer monitors displayed various feeds, security cameras, stock tickers, news channels. A chess set sat on a side table, mid-game. Adrian stood by the window, phone still in hand, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked different in daylight, less like the polished threat from the party, and more like what he actually was, a man who'd built an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness. "I'll call back," he said into the phone in Russian, then ended the call. "You slept." Eventually, Elena closed the door behind her, after reading every word of that contract 3 times. And I have questions." Adrian gestured to the leather chairs facing his desk. "I expected you would. Coffee?" "Please." He poured from a French press on the sideboard, preparing it the way she took it without asking. Cream, no sugar. How did he know that? Had he researched her the same way she'd researched him? "First question." Elena accepted the cup. "The trust fund, $10 million. That's not just protection money, that's life-changing wealth. Why give me that much?" "Because anything less would keep you dependent." Adrian settled into the chair across from her. "I don't want you staying because you can't afford to leave. I want you staying because you see value in what we're building." "What are we building? You keep saying partnership, alliance, but what does that actually mean?" "It means you stop being decoration and start being essential." Adrian's gaze was direct. "Your family has connections I need. Society pages, charity boards, political fundraisers. That's a world I can't access on my own. My money can buy me into rooms, but it can't buy me legitimacy. You can provide that." "So I'm a key to unlock doors." Elena's voice was flat. "You're that, but you're also intelligent, observant, and capable of thinking strategically under pressure. Those skills are rare, useful." He paused. "I have people who handle security, people who manage money, people who eliminate problems. What I don't have is someone who can navigate high society while understanding the reality beneath it. Someone who can sit at a charity gala and identify which politician is desperate, which businessman is vulnerable, which society wife knows more than she should." Elena felt something cold slide down her spine. "You want me to spy on my own world. I want you to see it clearly. The people you grew up with, they're not innocent, Elena. They're just better at hiding their corruption behind good manners and old money. Your father proved that. How many others at that party last night do you think are equally compromised? How many are one bad investment away from making the same deal your father made? And you'd offer them the same arrangement, find their weakness and exploit it? I'd offer them protection in exchange for access, same as I offered your father." Adrian's voice was matter of fact. "That's how power works. You find what people need and you become the only one who can provide it. Fear works, but desperation works better." Elena set down her coffee cup carefully. "You're describing a system built on blackmail and manipulation. I'm describing reality. The only difference between me and the men in expensive suits at your father's club is that I'm honest about what I am." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "Those men like to pretend they're civilized. They wear the right ties, give to the right charities, shake hands at the right fundraisers. But put them in a corner and they'll do exactly what your father did, sacrifice anything to save themselves. At least with me, you know where you stand." "And where do I stand?" "That depends on what you choose." Adrian's gray eyes held hers. "If you walk away, you stand outside all of this with enough money to build whatever life you want. If you stay, you stand beside me. Equal partner in everything I do." "Everything?" Elena's voice was sharp, including the parts that aren't in annual reports, the violence and the threats and whatever else you do to maintain this empire. "Yes?" Adrian didn't flinch. "I won't lie to you about what this life involves. There are people who would kill you just to hurt me. There are deals that get made in shadows, problems that get solved with methods you won't find in business school textbooks. If you stay, you need to understand that. Accept it. Or you become a liability neither of us can afford." Elena stood, moving to the window. Below, the ocean churned against rocks that had been carved smooth by centuries of waves. Relentless, powerful, inevitable. My whole life, she said quietly, I was taught that there were rules, that if you followed them, you'd be safe, protected. I believed in good families and proper behavior and the idea that nice people succeeded while bad people failed. She turned to face Adrian. Then my father sold me to save himself, and I realized it was all a lie. The rules only apply if you don't have enough money to ignore them. Yes. Adrian's voice was gentle in a way she hadn't heard before. That's the truth they don't teach in your private schools. Money doesn't just buy things, it buys options, freedom from consequences, the ability to rewrite rules that don't serve you. And you've rewritten all the rules. I've chosen which ones to follow and which ones to break. Adrian stood, moving to stand beside her at the window. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I built this empire from nothing, and I did whatever was necessary to build it. That makes me dangerous. It also makes me someone who keeps his word. When I tell you you're safe here, you are. When I promise you partnership, I mean it. Elena studied his profile, the hard angles of his face, the scar above his left eyebrow that she hadn't noticed before, the way he held himself with absolute certainty. Second question, she said. What happened to the last woman you were involved with? Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. There was no last woman, not in any meaningful sense. I don't believe you. You're 40 years old and powerful and wealthy. There must have been someone. There were transactions. Adrian's voice was cold now. Arrangements that were mutually beneficial for defined periods of time, but no partners. No one I trusted with anything that mattered. Why not? Because trust is the most dangerous thing you can give someone in this world. He turned to face her fully. Every person close to you is a potential weapon your enemies can use. Every relationship is a vulnerability. I learned that early, and I've lived by it ever since. Until now, Elena said softly. You're trusting me. I'm giving you the opportunity to earn trust, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. Right now, you know surface things that I have money, power, connections. You don't know how the empire actually works. You don't know where the bodies are buried, literally or figuratively. That information comes with time, with proof that you can be trusted. And how do I prove that? By making a choice. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that Elena could see gold flecks in his gray eyes. Stay or leave. But once you choose, commit to it. I don't have space in my life for people who stand in doorways wondering which side they belong on. Either you're in this completely or you're out completely. There's no middle ground. Elena's heart was hammering. This was the moment, the choice he'd promised her. If I stay, she said slowly, I need something from you. Name it. Honesty. Complete honesty, always. I don't care how ugly the truth is. I need to know I can trust what you tell me, because if I'm going to stand beside you in this world, I can't do it blind. Adrian considered this for a long moment. Honesty can be dangerous. There are things you might not want to know. Let me decide what I can handle. Elena's voice was firm. I'm not asking you to protect me from reality. I'm asking you to respect me enough to tell me the truth. Even when it's brutal, especially then. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Approval, maybe, or the beginning of respect. All right. Complete honesty. You have my word. Then I'm staying. The words came out steady, certain. Not because I don't have other options, but because I think you're right. We can build something together that neither of us could build alone. Adrian extended his hand like they were sealing a business deal. Elena took it, feeling the strength in his grip, the calluses that spoke of more than just signing contracts. Partners, Adrian said. Partners. Elena agreed. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, and Elena felt the weight of what she'd just chosen settle over her like armor. This was no fairy tale. There would be no rescue, no redemption through love, no magical transformation of the beast into a prince. This was a strategic alliance between two people who understood that power was the only currency that mattered, and Elena was done being powerless. So, she released his hand. Where do we start? Adrian's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Your education. If you're going to be my partner, you need to understand how everything works. The legitimate businesses, the gray areas, all of it. When? Now. Adrian gestured to his desk. I have a meeting in an hour with 3 men who think they're smarter than me. You're going to sit in and watch. Say nothing. Just observe. What kind of meeting? The kind where we negotiate shipping routes and customs protocols. On the surface, completely legal. Underneath, Adrian pulled files from his desk drawer. These men have been skimming profits and selling information to a competitor. They think I don't know. Today, I'm going to make them understand that I know everything. Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was real. Not theoretical discussions about power, but the actual exercise of it. What do you want me to learn from this? She asked. How to read people. Adrian handed her one of the files. Marcus Chen, David Ramirez, Victor Sokolov. Study their backgrounds, their families, their debts. When they walk into this room, I want you to watch their faces, their hands, the way they position themselves. People tell you everything if you know how to look. Elena took the file, scanning quickly. Marcus Chen, 45, managed Adrian's shipping operations in Asia. Divorced, 2 kids in private school, gambling problem. David Ramirez, 38, handled customs and import logistics. Single, recently purchased a house beyond his apparent means. Victor Sokolov, 52, supervised warehouse operations. 3 kids, wife with expensive taste, investments that had taken recent losses. They're all financially vulnerable, Elena said. They're desperate, Adrian corrected. And desperate men make predictable choices. Chen's been taking money from my competitors in exchange for information about shipping schedules. Ramirez has been looking the other way when certain containers don't get properly inspected. Sokolov's been outright stealing, small amounts, but consistent. How do you know? Because I pay attention. Adrian's voice was quiet but absolute. I track every dollar, every shipment, every conversation. When patterns change, I investigate. Always. So why not just fire them? Or, Elena hesitated, whatever you do to people who betray you. Because that would create noise, investigation, attention I don't need. Adrian moved to the chess set, studying the board. Better to make them understand they've been caught, renegotiate the terms of their employment, and turn them into assets. Fear makes people loyal in ways money never can. That's cold. That's practical. Adrian looked up at her. In this world, you can't afford sentiment. These men chose to steal from me. They chose to put their own needs above their loyalty. Now they'll learn there are consequences for those choices. A phone on Adrian's desk buzzed. He glanced at it, then back to Elena. They're here. Ready? Elena's stomach tightened with nerves, and something else. Anticipation. She was about to see how Adrian Volkov actually operated. Not the polished version from the engagement party, but the reality beneath. Ready, she said. Adrian pressed a button on his desk. Send them to the conference room. We'll be there in 5 minutes. He led Elena through the house to a room she hadn't seen before. All dark wood and leather, with windows overlooking the ocean and a table long enough to seat 20. Security cameras were visible in the corners, not hidden. A statement. Everything that happens here is recorded. Sit here. Adrian indicated a chair beside his at the head of the table. Remember, watch, don't speak. Learn how fear works. The men entered together, trying for confidence, but Elena could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their eyes darted to Adrian and away. They'd been summoned, and they knew it wasn't for congratulations. Gentlemen, Adrian's voice was pleasant. Sit. They sat. Marcus Chen across from Elena, David Ramirez, and Victor Sokolov on either side. All 3 wore suits that tried to project success but didn't quite achieve it. I'm sure you're wondering why I called this meeting, Adrian said conversationally. Let me save you the suspense. I know about the skimming. I know about the information sales. I know about the stolen merchandise. The color drained from Marcus Chen's face. David Ramirez went very still. Victor Sokolov started to speak, but Adrian cut him off with a raised hand. Don't. Adrian's voice was soft. Don't insult my intelligence with denials. I have documentation, bank records, recorded conversations, video footage. Everything. He slid folders across the table, one to each man. Elena watched as they opened them with trembling hands, saw their faces as they realized how thoroughly they'd been caught. "The question," Adrian continued, "is what we do about this situation. I could fire you, report you to authorities, or handle this through less official channels." He let that threat hang in the air. "Or we could come to a new understanding." "Mr. Volkov." Marcus Chen's voice cracked. "I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want loyalty." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "You three have skills I need. Chen, you understand Asian markets better than anyone I could replace you with. Ramirez, your customs connections are valuable. Sokolov, your operational knowledge is useful. I don't want to lose those assets." Hope flickered across their faces. Elena watched it happen, watched them grasp at the possibility of mercy. "However," Adrian's voice hardened, "the terms of your employment are changing. Your salaries are being cut by 30%. That money goes into an escrow account that you'll access when you retire, provided you remain loyal. Any future betrayal and you lose everything. The documentation I have on your current activities will be held as insurance. One wrong move and it goes to authorities. Are we clear?" They nodded, terrified and grateful in equal measure. "Also," Adrian wasn't finished, "each of you will provide monthly reports directly to me, not to your supervisors, to me, about operations, about potential problems, about anyone else who might be considering doing what you did. You're going to help me keep everyone else honest." He was turning them into informants. Elena understood the elegance of it. These men who'd betrayed him would now betray others to save themselves, and their fear would keep them honest. "Do we have an agreement?" Adrian asked. "Yes," Marcus Chen said quickly. "Yes, Mr. Volkov, thank you, I swear." "Don't swear, just perform." Adrian stood. "You're dismissed. Expect new contracts by end of business today." The three men practically fled from the room. When they were gone, Adrian turned to Elena. "What did you see?" Elena thought carefully. Chen was the most scared. He kept touching his wedding ring, family man, thinking about what he had to lose. Ramirez was calculating options the whole time, looking for an exit even while agreeing. Sokolov was just relieved. He thought you were going to kill him. Good observations. Adrian's approval was genuine. Chen will be loyal because he can't afford not to be. Ramirez will need watching. He's smart enough to be dangerous. Sokolov will do exactly what he's told because he's not creative enough to do otherwise. You scared them into submission. I gave them a choice between consequences they couldn't survive and terms they could live with. They chose survival. That's not fear. That's practicality. Adrian moved to the window. "This is how the Empire works, Elena. Every person is an asset or a liability. You identify which one they are, and you respond accordingly." "And me?" Elena asked quietly. "Which am I?" Adrian turned to face her. "That depends on what you do next. Right now, your potential. Tomorrow, next week, 6 months from now, you could be the most valuable asset I have. Or you could become a liability I have to eliminate." The threat was casual, matter-of-fact. Elena should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly steady. "Then I'd better make myself valuable," she said. "Yes." Adrian's gray eyes held hers. "You'd better." The rest of the day passed in a blur of information. Adrian showed her the organizational structure of his empire, the shipping companies, the security firms, the real estate holdings. He explained how money moved through offshore accounts, how legitimate businesses provided cover for less legitimate operations, how everything was designed with redundancy so that no single point of failure could bring it all down. Elena's head spun with names and numbers and connections. This was so far beyond anything she'd learned in school, so much more complex than she'd imagined. By evening, she was exhausted. They ate dinner in Adrian's study, simple food brought by Irina, eaten while reviewing contracts and financial statements. "That's enough for today," Adrian finally said, closing the last folder. "You look like your brain is going to explode." "It might," Elena rubbed her temples. "How do you keep track of all of this?" "Practice, and very good people managing the details." Adrian poured whiskey for both of them. "You don't need to memorize everything. You need to understand the structure, how pieces connect, where vulnerabilities are." Elena accepted the glass, grateful for the burn of alcohol. Adrian? Yes? Those men today. If they betray you again, what happens to them? Adrian met her eyes over his whiskey. Honesty, remember? If they betray me again, they disappear completely, and their families never know what happened. You'd kill them. I'd eliminate a threat to everything I've built. Yes. No apology, no justification, just truth. Elena should have been horrified, should have run, should have grabbed that contract and triggered every escape clause. Instead, she thought about her father selling her to save himself, about how the people she'd thought were civilized had turned out to be just as ruthless as Adrian, but less honest about it. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Okay, I understand. This is the world we're in. These are the rules. Elena set down her glass. If I'm going to survive here, I need to accept that. Accepting it and living with it are different things. Adrian's voice was gentle. The first time you watch someone suffer consequences for crossing me, you might feel differently. Maybe, Elena admitted. But I've already watched my whole life get dismantled because I was powerless. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be someone who has power, who makes choices instead of having choices made for her. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You're sure about this? Once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them. I'm sure. And Elena realized she was. Somewhere between this morning's uncertainty and tonight's exhaustion, she'd made a choice that went deeper than staying or leaving. She'd chosen to stop being a victim. Then tomorrow, Adrian said, your real education begins. Elena's real education began at dawn with a knock on her door and Irina's voice announcing that Adrian was waiting in the gym. Elena dragged herself from bed, pulled on workout clothes she'd found in the closet, and followed the sound of rhythmic impacts down a hallway she hadn't explored yet. The gym occupied an entire wing of the house, all gleaming equipment and mirrored walls. Adrian was at a heavy bag, his movements precise and controlled, each strike landing with devastating force. He wore only athletics pants and a tank top, and Elena could see the scars that marked his back and shoulders, evidence of a past far more violent than corporate negotiations. He caught sight of her in the mirror and stopped, breathing barely elevated despite the intensity of his workout. Good. You're on time. You said education. I thought you meant more files and organizational charts. Elena gestured at the gym equipment. That's part of it. But if you're going to stand beside me, you need to know how to protect yourself. Adrian tossed her a pair of boxing gloves. Physical vulnerability is the fastest way to become a liability. Put those on. For the next 2 hours, Adrian taught her basics: how to stand, how to move, how to recognize threats, and create distance. He was a patient teacher, correcting her form with touches that were clinical and impersonal, pushing her past the point where her muscles screamed, but never quite past the point where she'd break. Again, he held the practice mitt steady. Don't telegraph your movement. Your shoulder drops before you throw the punch. Anyone watching will see it coming. Elena adjusted, struck again. Better this time. Why does it matter? She asked between breaths. You have security, armed guards everywhere. Security can be compromised. Guards can be bought, or killed, or simply make mistakes. Adrian lowered the mitts. The only person you can truly rely on to keep you safe is yourself. Remember that. They finished with stretching, and Elena's entire body felt like it had been thoroughly dismantled and poorly reassembled. Adrian looked like he'd barely warmed up. Shower and meet me in the library in 30 minutes, he said. Bring questions. Today we start on the parts of the empire that exist in shadows. The library was at the heart of the house, a 2-story room lined with books in multiple languages. Adrian had files spread across a massive oak table, each marked with names and locations. Elena settled into the chair beside him, still feeling the burn in her muscles from the morning's training. These are the operations that would send me to prison if anyone could prove them, Adrian said without preamble, pushing a file toward her. Shipping routes that move more than legal cargo. Real estate purchases that launder money from sources I can't acknowledge. Security contracts that provide cover for activities that aren't strictly defensive. Elena opened the first file. Shipping manifests, customs documents, all looking perfectly legitimate until you understood what to look for. The inconsistent weights, the vague cargo descriptions, the routes that made no economic sense unless you were moving something that couldn't be declared. "You're smuggling," she said. "I'm facilitating transport for clients who need discretion. Sometimes that's art collectors avoiding taxes. Sometimes it's people fleeing countries where they're not safe. Sometimes it's materials that fall into legal gray areas depending on jurisdiction." Adrian's voice was neutral. "I don't ask questions I don't want answered. But you know what you're moving. I have suspicions. I make calculated decisions about acceptable risk." He pulled another file. "This is different. These are my legitimate concerns. The real estate development company, the private security firm that provides bodyguards for executives and celebrities, the shipping business that moves legal cargo efficiently. Their cover." Elena understood. The legitimate operations provide infrastructure and explanations for everything else. They're both. The legitimate businesses are profitable on their own. But yes, they also provide essential cover and access. Adrian stood, moved to the window overlooking the ocean. "The art of building an empire like mine is integration. Everything connects. Everything serves multiple purposes. That way, when investigators come, and they always come eventually, they find successful businesses with proper paperwork and no smoking guns." Have they come? Investigators? 3 times in the past decade. FBI, once. State Task Force, twice. They interviewed employees, reviewed records, found nothing they could prosecute. Adrian's smile was cold. "Because I'm very good at what I do. And because I have lawyers who are better at their jobs than the government attorneys are at theirs." Elena spent the morning reviewing files, asking questions, slowly understanding the intricate machine Adrian had built. Every business connected to every other business. Money flowed through offshore accounts and shell corporations, always moving, never staying still long enough for anyone to trace it completely. "This is brilliant," she said finally. "Morally questionable, possibly illegal, but absolutely brilliant." "Thank you." Adrian's dry tone suggested he knew she hadn't meant it entirely as a compliment. "Now tell me where the vulnerabilities are." Elena studied the organizational chart she'd been building in her head. "The customs officials. You're dependent on them looking the other way at critical points. If they get replaced, or if someone decides to investigate them specifically. Exactly. Which is why I have redundancy. Multiple routes, multiple officials, multiple backup plans." Adrian leaned over the table, pointing to different shipping lanes on a map. "Never depend on a single point of failure. Always have options." "And the lawyers? If they decided to cooperate with authorities, they won't. They're too implicated themselves. Their firm handles all my legal work, which means they've structured the corporations, drafted the contracts, provided the legal opinions that make everything look legitimate. If I go down, they go down with me." Adrian's eyes met hers. Mutually assured destruction is a powerful motivator for loyalty. They worked through lunch, Irina bringing sandwiches that went mostly uneaten as Elena absorbed information that rewrote everything she thought she understood about how power actually functioned. By mid-afternoon, her brain felt saturated, unable to process another detail. "Enough." Adrian closed the last file. "You're glazing over. Come with me. There's something else you need to see." He led her down to the garage, a space that housed a collection of vehicles that probably cost more than most people's houses. Adrian selected a nondescript sedan, not the flashy sports cars or the armored SUV, but something designed to be invisible. "Where are we going?" Elena asked as they drove down the winding coastal road. "To see where I started." Adrian's hands were steady on the wheel. "You can't understand who I am without understanding where I came from." They drove into the city, through neighborhoods that grew progressively rougher, abandoned factories, buildings with broken windows, streets where people watched their car pass with suspicious eyes. This wasn't the manicured world Elena had grown up in. This was where desperation lived. Adrian parked outside what looked like an old warehouse. The building was shabby but functional, with security cameras visible at every corner and men who looked like they knew how to handle themselves positioned near the entrances. "This was my first property," Adrian said. "Bought it 22 years ago with money I'd saved working 3 jobs and doing things I'm not proud of. It was condemned, full of squatters, considered worthless by everyone except me." He led her inside through a surprisingly clean interior that had been divided into units. Small apartments, each with basic furniture and functioning utilities. People lived here, Elena realized. Families. She could hear children playing somewhere above them. I renovated it myself. Took 2 years. Adrian's voice carried something that might have been nostalgia. I learned plumbing, electrical work, basic construction, made 1,000 mistakes. But when I was finished, I had housing I could rent affordably to people who couldn't get apartments anywhere else. Why? Elena asked. This can't be profitable. It's not. It loses money every month. Adrian climbed the stairs to the second floor. But it serves a purpose. The people who live here are loyal. They know I gave them a place when no one else would. Some of them work for me now. Some of them provide information about what's happening in neighborhoods my security teams can't penetrate. Some of them are just people trying to survive, and I remember what that's like. They reached the top floor where a single door stood open. Inside was a small apartment, sparsely furnished but meticulously clean. Adrian stood in the doorway, not entering. This is where I lived for 5 years. 1 room, shared bathroom down the hall, no heat in winter. His voice was distant. I was 18 when I came to this country. No family, no connections, barely spoke English. Everything I have, I built from here. Elena looked at the small space, trying to imagine Adrian as a desperate teenager instead of the powerful man beside her. What happened to your family? Dead. The word was flat, final. Russia in the 90s was violent. My father owed money to the wrong people. When he couldn't pay, they killed him. Then they killed my mother and my sister to make a point about debts and consequences. I survived because I wasn't home. How old were you? 16. Adrian finally stepped into the room, touching the wall like he was remembering. I spent 2 years running, hiding, doing whatever I had to do to stay alive. When I finally had enough money, I bought passage on a cargo ship to America. I thought I'd be safe here, thought I could start over. And you did. I survived. That's different from starting over. Adrian turned to face her. The boy who lived in this room was terrified every day. Afraid someone would find him, deport him, kill him. Afraid he'd end up like his father, owing debts he couldn't pay to people who didn't forgive. So he made a decision. He would never be powerless again, never be the person things happened to. He would become the person who made things happen. Elena understood then, truly understood what drove Adrian. This wasn't about greed or cruelty or even ambition in the conventional sense. This was about survival taken to its logical extreme. Adrian had looked at the world that killed his family and decided he would master it or die trying. Is that boy still in there? She asked softly. The one who was afraid? Every day. Adrian's honesty was startling. Fear doesn't go away, Elena. You just learn to use it, channel it into something productive. My fear makes me careful, thorough, impossible to surprise. It's kept me alive when smarter, stronger men ended up dead. And now? You have more power than you could ever use, more money than you could spend. When does it end? It doesn't. Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the city spreading below them. Because the moment I stop building, someone else starts taking what I have. That's the nature of power. It either grows or it dies. There's no steady state, no peaceful retirement. You rise until you fall, and the only question is how far you rise before the fall comes. That's exhausting. It's necessary. Adrian's reflection in the window met her eyes. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you've committed to. This isn't a game we can quit when it stops being fun. This is life or death every single day. The enemies I've made won't forget. The systems I've disrupted won't forgive. And the empire we're building together will demand everything we have. Elena joined him at the window, looking out at a city she'd thought she knew, but was only now beginning to understand. Somewhere down there were people like the teenager Adrian had been, desperate, afraid, trying to survive in a world that didn't care if they lived or died. And somewhere else were people like Adrian had become, powerful enough to help or hurt hundreds of people with a single decision. I'm not afraid of hard work, she said. I'm afraid of becoming someone I don't recognize. You already are someone you don't recognize. Adrian's voice was gentle. The Elena from 2 weeks ago wouldn't have stayed. Wouldn't have studied my empire with the kind of focus you brought to it. Wouldn't have spent this morning learning how to fight and this afternoon learning how to read financial documents for hidden crimes. You've already changed. The question is whether you're willing to keep changing. He was right. Elena barely recognized the person she was becoming. 2 weeks ago, her biggest concern had been art school applications. Now she was standing in a warehouse apartment learning about money laundering and smuggling operations and the kind of violence that shaped empires. I want to keep learning, she said firmly. Show me everything, the beautiful parts and the ugly parts. I don't want to be protected from reality anymore. All right. Adrian pulled out his phone, checked something, then pocketed it again. Then tonight, you're coming with me to a meeting, not as decoration, as my partner, and you're going to see exactly what kind of man I am when I need to be. They drove back to the house in silence, Elena processing everything she'd learned. The scared boy and the powerful man existed in the same person, fear and control intertwined so completely they couldn't be separated. She wondered what that did to someone over 22 years, whether you could maintain that kind of vigilance without losing essential pieces of yourself. Evening found Elena in her room, dressing for whatever meeting Adrian had planned. She'd learned to trust the clothes that appeared in her closet. Irina had impeccable taste and seemed to understand instinctively what each situation required. Tonight, it was a dress that was elegant but not flashy, expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of thing a serious person wore to serious meetings. Adrian was waiting in his study, wearing a suit that looked deceptively simple until you noticed the perfect tailoring, the quality of the fabric, the way it transformed him into someone even more intimidating. 2 men stood with him, both wearing the kind of watchful stillness that marked professional security. Elena, this is Marcus and Yuri. They'll be accompanying us tonight. Adrian introduced them without ceremony. Gentlemen, this is my fiancée. She is to be protected as I would be protected. Understood? Yes, sir. They spoke in unison, their eyes assessing Elena with professional detachment. They were calculating how to keep her alive, she realized. What vulnerabilities she presented. How to position themselves to shield her if necessary. Where are we going? Elena asked when they were in the car, Marcus driving with Yuri in the front passenger seat and Adrian beside her in the back. To meet a man who thinks he's smart enough to betray me. Adrian's voice was conversational. His name is Thomas Brennan. He runs my East Coast operations, or he did until 3 days ago when I discovered he's been selling information to the Volkov family. You're related to them? Distantly. They're the organization that killed my family. Adrian's tone didn't change, but Elena felt ice slide down her spine. They've been trying to move into my territory for years. Brennan decided his loyalty was negotiable. Tonight, I'm going to renegotiate the terms of his employment. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place that didn't advertise and didn't welcome anyone who wasn't known to management. They were ushered to a private room in the back where a man in his 50s waited with 2 bodyguards of his own. Thomas Brennan looked like success. Expensive suit, confident posture, the kind of smile that had probably closed 1,000 deals. He stood when they entered, extending his hand to Adrian. Adrian, good to see you. His voice was smooth, practiced. And this must be the lovely Elena I've heard so much about. Congratulations on the engagement. Adrian didn't take the offered hand. He simply moved to the head of the table and sat, gesturing for Elena to take the seat beside him. Brennan's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered, settling back into his own chair. I assume you know why we're here, Adrian said. I'm hoping it's to discuss the expansion opportunities and you've been in contact with Dmitry Volkov. Adrian's voice cut through the pleasantries like a blade. 3 meetings in the past month, 5 phone calls. An encrypted email account you thought was secure. The color drained from Brennan's face. His bodyguard shifted slightly, hands moving toward weapons they probably carried. But Marcus and Yuri were faster. Both had guns drawn and aimed before Brennan's men could react. Tell your people to stand down. Adrian's voice was bored. They're outmatched and you know it. Brennan made a small gesture and his bodyguards froze, hands visible, trying to look non-threatening. Adrian, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want information. Adrian leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed despite the tension crackling through the room. What did you tell them? Nothing, I swear, nothing important. Just, what did you tell them? The shift in Adrian's voice was subtle but devastating. Elena watched Brennan crumble under the weight of it, watched a man who'd thought himself powerful realize exactly how powerless he actually was. Shipping schedules. Brennan's voice shook. Warehouse locations. Names of officials who could be compromised. They paid well, Adrian. You understand? It was just business. Business? Adrian repeated the word like it tasted foul. You sold information that could get my people killed and called it business. No one was supposed to get hurt. They just wanted to know. They wanted to know how to dismantle what I've built. And you helped them because they offered you money. Adrian's gray eyes were cold as winter. How much? 2 million. Over 6 months. Brennan was sweating now. Adrian, please. I made a mistake. Let me make it right. I'll give the money back. I'll tell you everything they wanted to know. You'll die. Adrian said it simply, like announcing the weather. Not tonight. Not here. But sometime in the next week you'll have an accident. A heart attack, maybe. Or a car crash. Something that doesn't point back to me. And the last thing you'll think about is how you betrayed someone who trusted you for 30 pieces of silver. Elena felt her breath catch. This was it. The moment Adrian had warned her about. She was watching him pass a death sentence as casually as ordering dinner. Please. Brennan was begging now, all his polished confidence shattered. Please, I have a family, kids in college, a wife who will be taken care of. Adrian's voice softened slightly. I'm not cruel enough to punish them for your mistakes. They'll receive your life insurance, your pension, everything you would have left them if you died of natural causes. But you, Thomas, you chose to betray me. You chose to put everyone in my organization at risk. Actions have consequences. Adrian, I'm begging you, son, tell me everything. Adrian's tone became businesslike. Every conversation with Dmitry Volkov, every piece of information you provided, every question they asked, give me all of it, and I'll make sure your death is painless. Hold back even one detail, and it won't be. Elena watched Brennan break completely, watched him spill every secret in exchange for the mercy of a quick death. It took 20 minutes. When he was finished, he sat slumped in his chair, tears streaming down his face. A man who'd traded his life for money and now understood exactly what that exchange meant. Thank you for your honesty. Adrian stood. Marcus will escort you home. Spend the next few days with your family. Make sure everything is in order. And Thomas? He paused at the door. I truly am sorry it came to this. You were good at your job once. You should have stayed that way. They left Brennan sobbing at the table, his bodyguards uncertain what to do. In the car, Elena sat very still, processing what she'd just witnessed. You're really going to kill him. It wasn't a question. Yes. Adrian's voice was matter of fact. He gave information that could have gotten dozens of my people killed. That could have cost me years of work and hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no coming back from that level of betrayal. And his family? Will be protected and provided for exactly as I said. I don't punish innocent people for the sins of guilty ones. Adrian looked at her directly. I know what you're thinking, that this makes me a monster, a murderer. You're not wrong. I'm thinking, Elena said slowly, that I understand why you had to do it. In your world, mercy to traitors is seen as weakness. If Brennan lived, others would think betrayal was survivable. They'd take the risk. Exactly. Adrian's voice carried something that might have been approval or might have been sadness. This is the price of power, Elena. Sometimes you have to do monstrous things to protect what you've built, and you have to be willing to live with that afterwards. To wake up every morning knowing the blood on your hands will never wash clean. How do you live with it? By remembering why it's necessary, by protecting the people who've stayed loyal, by making sure that every terrible thing I do serves a purpose. Adrian was quiet for a moment, and by accepting that I'm not a good man, I'm an effective one. There's a difference. Elena thought about the warehouse apartment, about the teenager who'd lost his family to violence and debt, about the man who'd built an empire from nothing and maintained it through fear and ruthlessness, about the complicated truth that sometimes people were both victims and villains, and the line between them was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. I'm still here, she said finally, still choosing this. Does that make me a monster too? It makes you someone who understands how the world actually works. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness of the car. Not everyone can handle that understanding. Most people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. The fact that you're willing to see reality, that takes a kind of strength most people don't have. They rode the rest of the way in silence, hands clasped, two people who'd chosen each other, not despite the darkness, but because of their willingness to acknowledge it. Back at the house, Elena stood in her room, looking out at the ocean and thinking about everything she'd learned. The empire, the violence, the calculated cruelty that kept it all functioning. She should have been horrified, should have grabbed that contract and triggered every escape clause. Instead, she felt something else: understanding, acceptance, and beneath it all, a growing certainty that she belonged here in this world of shadows and power. She was becoming someone new, someone harder, someone willing to make difficult choices and live with the consequences. Someone who could stand beside Adrian Volkov and not flinch when the darkness came. And the truly terrifying part was how natural it felt, how easily she was adapting to this new reality. Like some part of her had always known this was who she could become, if she was honest enough to admit it. Elena pulled out her phone, typed a message to her parents that she'd been composing in her head all day. "I'm not coming back. This is my choice. Stop trying to save me from something I've chosen. I'm exactly where I belong." She sent it before she could reconsider, then turned off her phone and watched the city lights flicker in the distance like fallen stars. Tomorrow, her education would continue. Tomorrow, she would learn more about the empire she was helping to build and protect. Tomorrow, she would take another step away from the girl she'd been and toward the woman she was becoming. But tonight, she let herself feel the weight of what she'd chosen. The gravity of standing beside a man who could order death as easily as ordering coffee. The responsibility of being partner to someone whose enemies would happily kill her just to hurt him. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The news of Thomas Brennan's death came 3 days later. A heart attack, the report said. Tragic. Unexpected. His family was devastated, his colleagues shocked. The obituary praised his business acumen and charitable work, mentioned his loving wife and accomplished children. Elena read the article on her tablet over breakfast, her coffee going cold as she absorbed the clinical language that described a man's death without mentioning how it had really happened. Adrian sat across from her, reviewing his own set of morning briefings, silent until she set the tablet down. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. "No." Elena surprised herself with how true it was. Just acknowledgement of what this life means, what we do. Good. Adrian's approval was subtle, but genuine. Regret makes you hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. The wedding was scheduled for 2 weeks away, though Elena had stopped thinking of it as a wedding and started thinking of it as a formalization of the partnership they'd already built. In the days following Brennan's death, her education had accelerated. Adrian brought her into more meetings, more decisions, more of the intricate machinery that kept his empire running. She learned to read people the way Adrian did, watching for tells, for weaknesses, for the small signals that revealed what someone really wanted beneath what they claimed to want. She learned to speak in the careful language of power, where every word was chosen for maximum impact and minimum vulnerability. And she learned, slowly, to trust her own instincts when something felt wrong, which was why, on a Thursday morning exactly 1 week before the wedding, Elena found herself standing in Adrian's security center staring at surveillance feeds and feeling ice crystallize in her chest. "Adrian." Her voice was sharp enough to pull him from the phone call he'd been taking. "You need to see this." He crossed to where she stood, following her pointing finger to one of the screens. 2 men in business suits standing at the main gate speaking to security. They looked ordinary enough, mid-30s, professional, the kind of people who could be salesmen or lawyers or any number of legitimate visitors. Except Elena recognized one of them. "The one on the left," she said. "Dmitry Volkov's nephew. I saw his photograph in the files you showed me last week." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Elena had learned to read the subtle shifts in his posture, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his hands went very still. He was calculating, processing, planning. "How confident are you?" he asked. 90%. The angle's not perfect, but the facial structure matches. And look at his stance. Military training, same as the other Volkov operatives in your files. Adrian pressed the intercom. "Marcus, the 2 men at the gate. Detain them, politely. Tell them I'll be available for a meeting in 20 minutes and escort them to the east waiting room. Copy that. Marcus's voice crackled back. Adrian turned to Elena, something like pride flickering in his gray eyes. Good catch. Most people wouldn't have made that connection. You taught me to pay attention. Elena watched the screens as security surrounded the two men, all smiles and professional courtesy, while making it clear they weren't leaving. What are they doing here? Testing our defenses, seeing how close they can get, maybe planning something more aggressive. Adrian pulled up additional camera feeds, tracking the men's approach to the property. The question is what they hope to accomplish. They know about the wedding, Elena said slowly. It's been all over the society pages. Photo shoots, guest lists, venue details, everything public and documented. Which makes it a perfect opportunity for them to send a message. Adrian's voice was grim. Either through disruption or something more permanent. Elena felt her pulse quicken. You think they'll attack during the ceremony? I think they're looking for any vulnerability they can exploit. The wedding is public, high profile, with hundreds of witnesses. It would be bold to the point of suicide to attempt anything there directly. Adrian pulled up blueprints of the venue, a historic mansion with gardens that had hosted 100 society weddings. But bold plays get attention, make statements that can't be ignored. So we cancel, Elena said. Move it somewhere private, somewhere you control completely. We don't cancel. Adrian's voice was firm. That shows fear, weakness. And it tells them they can influence our decisions. No, we proceed exactly as planned, but we prepare for every possible scenario. He spent the next hour on the phone, his voice never rising, but the intensity of his instructions making it clear this was a crisis. Additional security teams mobilized. Background checks intensified on every vendor, every guest, every person who would be anywhere near the venue. Contingency plans developed for evacuations, lockdowns, armed response. Elena watched him work, fascinated by the precision of it. Adrian didn't panic or rage or make grand gestures. He simply identified problems, assigned resources, and moved methodically through every potential vulnerability until he'd armored them all. The waiting room, he said finally, pocketing his phone. Let's find out what they want. Elena followed him through the house to a room she'd never entered before. Expensively furnished but strategically designed, with cameras hidden in the artwork and security positioned in adjacent rooms. The two men stood when Adrian entered, their professional smiles not quite masking their wariness. Mr. Volkov. The older one extended his hand. Thank you for seeing us. I'm David Morrison. This is my colleague James Chen. We're with Apex Consulting Group. No, you're not. Adrian didn't take the offered hand. You're Alexei Volkov, nephew of Dmitry. Your companion is Pavel Konstantin, former Spetsnaz, currently employed as muscle for the Volkov organization. We can continue this conversation honestly, or we can waste each other's time with pleasant fiction. Your choice. The masks dropped. Alexei's smile turned cold, his posture shifting from businessman to predator. Well, it seems our intelligence about your security was accurate. Your intelligence didn't account for her. Adrian gestured to Elena. My fiancé has an excellent memory for faces, one of many useful qualities. Alexei's gaze slid to Elena, assessing her with the same calculation she'd been using on him. She met his eyes steadily, refusing to look away or show fear. This was a test, she understood. Everything was always a test. Impressive, Alexei said finally. My uncle will be interested to know the Whitmore girl has more spine than her father. What do you want? Adrian's voice cut through the posturing. To deliver a message from my uncle. Alexei reached slowly into his jacket, mindful of the security Elena knew was watching from hidden positions, and pulled out an envelope. He requests a meeting, neutral ground, next week. He believes there are mutually beneficial arrangements to be made. Adrian took the envelope but didn't open it. Your uncle had Thomas Brennan feeding him information for 6 months. Why would I trust anything he proposes? Because Brennan is dead, and my uncle has no desire to waste more resources on subterfuge when a direct conversation might serve both your interests. Alexei's English was perfect, accent carefully modulated. The past is past. He's proposing we discuss the future. The future where he expands into my territory, absorbs my operations, that future? Adrian's voice was dangerously quiet. The future where we stop bleeding resources, fighting each other, and start making real money. Alexei leaned against the desk, carefully casual. You're smart, Volkov. You know the old ways don't work anymore. The Americans, they want to pretend we don't exist. Fine. We exist quietly. But we exist together, coordinated, instead of cutting each other's throats. Your uncle killed my family. 25 years ago. Different time, different circumstances. Alexei spread his hands. Neither of us can change the past, but we can choose whether to let it control our future. My uncle is offering peace, partnership, a way forward that doesn't end with one of us dead. Elena watched Adrian process this, saw him weighing options and calculating risks. This was the moment, she realized. Accept the meeting and risk walking into a trap. Refuse and guarantee the conflict would escalate. I'll consider his proposal, Adrian said finally. You can tell him my answer by tomorrow evening. Now get out of my house. Alexei smiled, recognizing a dismissal when he heard one. Of course. It was a pleasure meeting you both. And congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I'm sure it will be, memorable. The threat in those words was subtle but unmistakable. Elena felt her hands clench into fists, but she kept her expression neutral, her voice steady when she spoke. Thank you. We're expecting it to be quite an event. She paused deliberately. Security will be exceptional, of course. We've spared no expense ensuring our guests' safety. Alexei's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing the counter-threat. I'm sure they'll be very well protected. Good day? Marcus appeared to escort them out, and Elena watched on the security feeds as they were guided to their car and off the property. Only when the gates closed behind them did she let out the breath she'd been holding. That was a warning, she said, about the wedding. Yes. Adrian opened the envelope, scanning the contents. Among other things, Dmitri wants to meet 3 days before the ceremony. Neutral location. No more than 2 security personnel each. It's a trap. Probably. Adrian set the letter aside. Or it's exactly what he claims. An attempt to establish détente before this escalates into open war. Either way, I have to respond. You can't go. Elena heard the urgency in her own voice. Adrian, he killed your family. This is the man who murdered your parents and your sister. You can't trust anything he offers. I don't trust him, but I trust my ability to assess situations and extract myself if necessary. Adrian moved to the window, looking out at grounds that were beautiful and deadly, every inch monitored and protected. If I refuse the meeting, I look weak, afraid. It emboldens him and everyone else watching this situation. If I go, I gather intelligence about what he's actually planning and buy time to prepare our own countermeasures. Then I'm coming with you. Elena said it firmly, no room for argument. Absolutely not. You said partnership, you said equal. That means I don't sit safely at home while you walk into potential danger. Elena crossed to stand beside him. Besides, you need me there. Dmitri will expect fear or anger from you. He won't expect rational negotiation supported by someone who can read the room and provide objective assessment. He'll see you as a vulnerability he can exploit. Let him try. Elena's voice was hard. I've spent the last 3 weeks learning from you. Learning how to see through lies, how to recognize threats, how to stay calm under pressure. Put me in that room. Let me prove I'm actually your partner, not just someone you're protecting. Adrian studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face for doubt or fear. Elena held his gaze, letting him see the certainty she felt. This was who she'd become, someone who ran toward danger instead of away from it, because hiding meant staying powerless. One condition, Adrian said finally. You follow my lead completely. If I tell you to leave, you leave. If I tell you to stay silent, you stay silent. No questions, no hesitation. Agreed? Agreed. Then you're coming with me. Adrian pulled out his phone, already planning. We have 3 days to prepare. That means research, strategy, contingencies for every scenario I can imagine, and you're going to help me build them all. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Elena learned everything available about Dmitri Volkov, his background, his operations, his known associates, his weaknesses. She studied negotiation tactics and threat assessment. She practiced staying calm while Adrian's security team ran scenarios that ended in violence. teaching her how to recognize the moment before shots were fired, how to create distance, how to survive. She also planned her wedding, because life didn't stop for death threats and dangerous meetings. Flowers were selected, seating charts finalized, menu tastings completed. The surreal juxtaposition of choosing between roses and peonies while learning to identify potential assassins in a crowd would have broken Elena 2 weeks ago. Now it felt almost natural. The night before the meeting with Dmitri, Adrian found Elena in the library reviewing surveillance photos of Dmitri's known operatives. She'd been at it for hours, memorizing faces until she could identify them instantly. "You should rest," he said quietly. "I will. After I finish this set." Elena didn't look up. "If any of these people are at the meeting location, we need to know immediately." Adrian settled into the chair beside her, watching her work. "You've changed. So have you." Elena finally met his eyes. "When I first saw you at that engagement party, you were performing, playing the role of the powerful criminal who'd acquired a society wife. Now you're just you. And you're not the terrified girl your father sold to save himself. You're someone who chooses to stand in dangerous rooms because you refuse to be powerless." Adrian's hand covered hers on the table. "I want you to know something. Tomorrow, if things go badly, if this is a trap, and we don't walk out, I don't regret bringing you into this world. You belong here more than anyone I've ever met." "We're walking out," Elena said firmly. "Both of us. Because I'm not done building this empire with you, and I'm not letting Dmitri Volkov take what we've created." "There's the fire I was hoping for." Adrian's smile was slight but genuine. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow requires us to be sharp." The meeting was set for noon at a restaurant that had been closed for renovations, neutral ground that belonged to neither of them. Adrian drove with Elena beside him, Marcus and Yuri following in a separate car. The streets were ordinary, everyday traffic flowing normally, people going about their lives unaware that two criminal empires were about to negotiate peace or plan war. The restaurant's parking lot was empty except for 2 black SUVs and a sedan. Adrian parked precisely in the center of the lot, equidistant from all potential threats, and turned to Elena. "Last chance to stay in the car." "Not happening." Elena checked her appearance in the mirror, professional, composed, every inch the society woman she'd been raised to be. It was armor now, a disguise that let her move through dangerous spaces while everyone underestimated what she was capable of. They entered together, Marcus and Yuri flanking them. The restaurant's interior was dimly lit, tables pushed against walls to create an open space. At the far end, Dmitri Volkov sat at a table with 2 men Elena recognized from the surveillance photos, his head of security and his primary enforcer. Dmitri stood as they approached. He was older than Elena expected, probably in his 70s, with white hair and the kind of deep wrinkles that came from decades of hard living. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing as he assessed Adrian and then Elena. "Adrian," Dmitri's voice carried a heavy Russian accent. "You look like your father. Same eyes, same way of standing, like the world owes you something." "My father is dead because of you." Adrian's voice was perfectly controlled. "Let's not pretend this is a family reunion. Your father was a fool who borrowed money he couldn't repay and thought family connection would protect him. It didn't." Dmitri gestured to the chairs across from him. "Sit. Let's discuss whether you're smarter than he was." They sat, Elena positioning herself so she could watch both Dmitri's men and the exits. Marcus and Yuri took positions that mirrored Dmitri's security, everyone aware that this peaceful facade could shatter into violence in seconds. "You brought the girl." Dmitri's gaze settled on Elena. "Interesting choice." "This is Elena Whitmore, my fiancée and business partner." Adrian's emphasis on partner was deliberate. "Anything you say to me, you say to her." "Business partner." Dmitri's laugh was dry. "You always had ambition, Adrian. Taking a Whitmore as wife, that's smart. Access to society, political connections, legitimacy. Your father would approve." "My father's approval isn't something I seek." Adrian leaned back in his chair, projecting casual confidence. "You requested this meeting. Make your proposal." "Direct? Good." Dmitri poured vodka into 4 glasses, sliding 2 across the table. "I propose we stop wasting resources fighting each other. Your territory is West Coast, mine is East. We establish clear boundaries, coordinate on opportunities that benefit both organizations, and present a united front to anyone who thinks they can move against either of us. And in exchange, Adrian didn't touch the vodka. In exchange, I stopped trying to absorb your operations. You stopped planning revenge for your family. We both make more money and live longer. Dmitri raised his glass. To practical solutions to old problems. Adrian studied the older man for a long moment. Elena could feel the tension radiating from him, the control it was taking to sit across from his family's killer and discuss business arrangements. You killed my mother. Adrian's voice was quiet but absolutely clear. She was 38 years old. She begged you to spare my sister. Svetlana was 14. You shot them both and left them in the street like garbage. I did. Dmitri didn't deny it. And I would do it again under the same circumstances because your father's debt required a message that others would remember. That's the world we live in, Adrian. You know this. You've killed people for lesser betrayals than your father's. So why should I accept peace from a man who taught me that debts require blood payment? Because you're smart enough to know that revenge is expensive and ultimately unprofitable. Dmitri's eyes were hard. You want to kill me? Fine, try. But I have an organization that will retaliate against everyone you care about. Your businesses, your people, your pretty fiancée sitting there pretending she's not afraid. I'm not afraid. Elena spoke for the first time, her voice steady. I'm calculating how many ways this conversation ends badly for you if you threaten me again. Dmitri's eyebrows rose. She has fire. I see why you chose her. But fire without wisdom gets you burned, little girl. I'm neither little nor a girl. Elena leaned forward slightly. I'm the person who identified your nephew when he came to our home pretending to be someone else. I'm the person who studied every photograph of your known associates until I could identify them in a crowd. And I'm the person who will make sure that if anything happens to Adrian, your organization suffers consequences you can't imagine. Bold words from someone who's been in this world for what, 3 weeks? Dmitri's smile was cold. You think you understand what you've walked into? You're playing at being a criminal's wife while the real players decide your future. The real players? Elena's voice cut like glass. You mean men who kill families over debt and call it business? Who sit in closed restaurants making threats because they're too old and tired to actually execute them? You're not a real player anymore, Dmitri. You're a relic pretending the old ways still matter. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dmitri's security moved slightly, hands near weapons, but Dmitri raised a hand to stop them. His eyes on Elena were calculating now, reassessing. Adrian, he said slowly, not looking away from Elena. Control your woman before she says something that requires a response I don't want to make. She speaks for both of us. Adrian's voice was calm. And she's right. You came here proposing peace because you know you can't win an extended war. Your organization is spread too thin. Your resources are depleted from fighting on multiple fronts, and your nephew's attempt to gather intelligence through Brennan failed completely. So yes, let's discuss peace, but from a position of honesty. You need this more than I do. Dmitri was silent for a long moment, vodka glass forgotten in his hand. Then, surprising them all, he laughed, a genuine sound of appreciation. You have courage, both of you. Foolish courage, perhaps, but I respect it. He set down his glass. Very well. Honest negotiation. I propose territorial boundaries clearly defined, no interference in each other's operations, and cooperation on opportunities where our interests align. In exchange, I leave you alone, and you abandon whatever revenge fantasies keep you awake at night. And when you die, Adrian asked, what happens to this peace when your nephew inherits your organization? Alexei will honor agreements I make. He's ambitious, but he's not stupid. Dmitri pulled out a document, slid it across the table. This formalizes everything. Territories, protocols for dispute resolution, terms for cooperation. Sign it, and this war ends today. Adrian picked up the document, reading carefully. Elena watched Dmitri's face, looking for any sign of deception, any tell that this was an elaborate trap. But the old man looked genuinely tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from decades of violence. There's a clause here, Adrian said slowly. About successors. It says if either of us dies, our organizations honor the agreement for 5 years minimum before any renegotiation. Insurance, Dmitri confirmed. So neither of us gets killed immediately after signing. 5 years of guaranteed peace, even if one of us doesn't survive to enjoy it. It was smart, Elena realized. Self-interest aligned to create stability. Both men protected by their agreement even after death. I want one addition, Adrian said. Elena is named specifically as my successor if anything happens to me. Your organization treats her with the same respect and cooperation you show me. Done. Dmitri nodded to one of his men, who produced a pen. Any other modifications? The shipping routes in Section 7 need clarification, and the dispute resolution process should include a neutral third party, not just direct negotiation. They spent the next hour revising language, adjusting terms, building a framework for peace between two organizations that had been enemies for decades. Elena watched Adrian work, fascinated by how he negotiated, patient, thorough, missing no detail. This was the businessman beneath the criminal, the strategic mind that had built an empire from nothing. Finally, the document was complete. Adrian read it once more, then picked up the pen. To practical solutions, he said, echoing Dmitri's earlier words, and signed his name. Dmitri signed as well, witnessed by their respective security. Just like that, a war that had been brewing for years ended with signatures on paper. To your wedding, Dmitri raised his glass again. May you find what I never did, someone to share the burden of this life. I already have. Adrian's hand found Elena's under the table. That's why I can afford to make peace. I have something more important than revenge now. They left the restaurant with the signed agreement, walking into afternoon sunlight that felt surreal after the tension of the negotiation. In the car, Elena finally allowed herself to breathe normally. We did it, she said. You did it, Adrian corrected. Your read on Dmitri was perfect. Calling him out on his weakness gave us leverage to negotiate from strength. I thought he might shoot me for it. So did I. Adrian's smile was slight. But you were right. He needed this piece more than we did, and showing him we knew that changed the dynamic completely. Elena leaned back against the leather seat, adrenaline slowly fading. Is it real, the piece? For now. Dmitri's signature is worthless if he dies tomorrow and Alexei decides to ignore it. But for now, yes. We bought time, space to breathe, and most importantly, protection during the wedding. Adrian pulled her closer. No attacks, no disruptions. Just a ceremony that makes our partnership official. Speaking of which, Elena pulled out her phone. The florist needs final confirmation by tonight, and we still haven't decided between the string quartet or the classical ensemble for the ceremony. The mundane concerns of wedding planning felt absurd after negotiating with a man who'd killed Adrian's family. But that was their life now. Violence and beauty, danger and normalcy, all woven together until they couldn't be separated. String quartet, Adrian decided. More intimate. And I want something intimate, not a performance. Intimate with 300 guests? You know what I mean? Elena did know. Amid all the spectacle and strategy, they were actually getting married, making promises to each other that went beyond business arrangements and survival tactics, building something that might be called love, if love could exist in a world this dark. The wedding was 4 days away now. 4 days until Elena became Mrs. Volkov officially, until their partnership was formalized in front of everyone who mattered. 4 days to prepare for whatever came next. And she was ready. For all of it. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and perfect, the kind of California day that looked like it had been ordered specifically for the occasion. Elena woke alone in her suite at the historic Ashford estate where the ceremony would take place, surrounded by flowers and champagne and all the trappings of a society wedding that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. She stood at the window, watching security teams patrol the grounds in their dark suits, earpieces visible, weapons concealed but present. 300 guests would arrive in a few hours, each one vetted and cleared, their names cross-referenced against every threat database Adrian had access to. The string quartet was warming up somewhere below. Caterers moved through the kitchens, preparing food that had been inspected and tested. Photographers positioned themselves for the perfect shots. It was beautiful and meticulous, and beneath it all ran a current of potential violence that most of the guests would never notice. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Elena?" Her mother's voice, tentative in a way it had never been before. "May I come in?" Elena hesitated, then opened the door. Victoria Whitmore stood in the hallway wearing a designer dress and an expression that might have been regret if Elena had believed her mother capable of that emotion. "You look beautiful," her mother said softly, taking in the silk robe and the organized chaos of Elena's preparation. "Just like I always imagined for your wedding day. Except I'm marrying a man you and father sold me to." Elena kept her voice even. "Let's not pretend this is what you imagined." "No." Victoria stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "What I imagined was you married to some appropriate young man from a good family, living in a house near ours, giving me grandchildren I could show off at the club. This is something else entirely. This is my choice." Elena moved to the vanity where her makeup artist had laid out everything needed. "I know you don't understand that, but I chose to stay. I chose Adrian, and I chose this life. Did you?" Her mother's voice was sharp. "Or did you convince yourself you chose it because the alternative was admitting you're trapped?" Elena turned to face her mother fully. "I had $10 million and a contract that let me walk away any time. I still have that. I'm here because I want to be, because I've built something with Adrian that matters more than art school in Paris ever did. You've become one of them." Victoria said it like a diagnosis. "I can see it in your eyes. That hardness, that willingness to accept things that should be unacceptable. Elena, you're 20 years old. You should be worried about grades and boyfriends and where to travel this summer, not learning how to negotiate with criminals and plan for security threats at your own wedding." "Maybe," Elena began applying her makeup with steady hands. "But that innocent girl you're describing? She died the moment father traded her future to save his political career. You can mourn her if you want." "I don't." Her mother was silent for a long moment, watching Elena transform herself with cosmetics and careful precision. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller, older. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, "for not protecting you, for letting your father make that deal, for teaching you that family duty mattered more than your own happiness. I'm sorry for all of it." Elena paused, mascara wand halfway to her lashes. In 20 years, she'd never heard her mother apologize for anything. Victoria Whitmore didn't do regret or remorse. She did strategy and appearances and careful social calculation. "Why now?" Elena asked. "Because I'm watching you marry a dangerous man, and I can't tell if you're brave or broken." Her mother's eyes were wet, and I realized that either way, I helped make you this person. So I'm sorry. Even if it's too late for sorry to matter. Elena set down the mascara, turned to face her mother directly. "It's not too late. But I need you to understand something. I'm not broken. I'm not trapped. I'm exactly where I choose to be, with a man who treats me like an equal partner instead of a decoration. Adrian is dangerous, yes, but he's honest about what he is. Unlike father, who hid behind respectability while doing equally corrupt things. Your father made mistakes. Father sold his daughter to avoid consequences for his choices." Elena's voice was hard. "Don't defend that. Don't pretend it was anything other than what it was." Victoria nodded slowly, accepting the truth of it. "You're right, he did, and I let him." She moved to the window, looking out at the gardens below. "But you should know something. After you sent that message saying you weren't coming back, your father had a breakdown. Real one, not just political theater. He's been in therapy, trying to understand how he became someone who could do what he did." "Good." Elena felt no sympathy. "He should understand it. Should live with it every day the way I had to live with being traded like property. He knows you'll never forgive him." "He's right." Elena returned to her makeup. "But that's his burden to carry, not mine. I have a wedding to finish preparing for." Her mother lingered a moment longer, then moved toward the door. "For what it's worth, I hope you're happy, truly. Even if happiness looks different than I ever imagined for you." "It does." Elena met her mother's eyes in the mirror. "And I am." After Victoria left, Elena sat alone with her thoughts and her reflection. The woman staring back at her looked like a society bride, elegant, composed, expensive. but her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who'd learned to navigate darkness, who'd made peace with moral complexity, who'd chosen power over innocence. A second knock came, followed by Irina's warm voice. "Miss Elena, your dress is ready, and you have a delivery." Elena opened the door to find Irina holding a small box wrapped in simple paper. "From Mr. Volkov. He said to open it now." Inside the box was a necklace that made Elena's breath catch. Not the ostentatious emeralds from their engagement party, but something far more personal. A delicate platinum chain with a single pendant. A key. The note with it was written in Adrian's precise handwriting. "You've always had the key to walk away. Today, you're choosing to stay. That makes you the bravest person I know." "Ah." Elena fastened the necklace, feeling the weight of the key settle against her sternum. It was a promise and a reminder, beautiful and slightly dangerous, exactly like the man who'd given it to her. Getting into the wedding dress required Irina's help, and 20 minutes of careful work with buttons and lacing. The gown was a masterpiece, classic lines with modern edges, expensive without being showy, the kind of dress that would photograph beautifully while being comfortable enough to wear for hours. When Elena finally saw herself fully assembled in the floor-length mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. This wasn't the terrified girl from the engagement party. This was someone who'd chosen her path with full knowledge of where it led. "You look like a queen," Irina said softly. "Mr. Volkov is a lucky man. We're both lucky." Elena adjusted the necklace so the key was visible. "We found each other at exactly the right moment." The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, when the light would be perfect for photographs and the heat of the day would have mellowed. Elena waited in a preparation room while guests arrived, watching security feeds on a tablet that Marcus had provided. She recognized faces from society pages, from political fundraisers, from Adrian's legitimate business operations. She also recognized faces from the darker files she'd studied, people who worked in the shadows, who handled problems that couldn't be solved through legal channels, who understood exactly what kind of empire they were celebrating today. "They're ready for you." Marcus appeared in the doorway, professional as always, but with something that might have been approval in his eyes. "The groom is at the altar. Security is in position. Everything's clear." Elena took a final deep breath, adjusted her dress, and stepped into the hallway. There was no father to walk her down the aisle. She'd refused that particular tradition, unwilling to let the man who'd sold her pretend to give her away. Instead, she walked alone, head high, toward the gardens where 300 people waited. The music shifted as she appeared, the string quartet launching into something classical and beautiful. Guests turned to watch, phones discreetly recording despite the no photography rules, everyone wanting to capture this moment where two worlds collided. And at the end of the flower-lined aisle, Adrian waited. He wore a tuxedo that transformed him from dangerous criminal to something almost civilized, though Elena could see the evidence of concealed weapons in the precise way the jacket hung, the bulk at his ankle where she knew he kept a backup piece. His gray eyes found hers across the distance, and everything else fell away. The guests, the security, the complex machinery of the empire they'd built together. It was just them. Two people who'd chosen each other against all logic and reason. Elena walked toward him steadily, passing faces she knew and faces she didn't, aware that everyone here understood this was more than a wedding. This was a coronation of sorts. The moment Elena Whitmore officially became Elena Volkov, partner to one of the most powerful men on the West Coast. She reached the altar, and Adrian took her hand, his grip warm and solid and certain. The officiant began speaking, words about love and partnership and lifelong commitment. Elena barely heard them, focused instead on Adrian's face, on the subtle shift in his expression that told her he was as aware as she was of every potential threat, every vulnerability, every way this could go wrong. But nothing went wrong. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned, words exchanged and vows spoken and rings placed on fingers. When the officiant pronounced them married and invited Adrian to kiss his bride, the kiss was brief and proper and absolutely nothing like the passion Elena knew existed beneath Adrian's controlled exterior. That was for later, for private moments when they weren't performing for hundreds of witnesses. The reception flowed seamlessly from ceremony, guests moving to dinner tables arranged on the lawn, while the string quartet played and champagne flowed. Elena and Adrian made the rounds together, greeting people, accepting congratulations, playing their parts perfectly. Stunning wedding. A senator whose name Elena couldn't immediately recall shook Adrian's hand enthusiastically. You two make quite the power couple. Thank you, Senator. Adrian's smile was practiced. We're looking forward to many years of partnership. Partnership. The word that defined everything they were building. Not love, though Elena suspected something like love existed between them, grown from respect and shared purpose rather than romance. But partnership first and always. Dinner was elaborate and perfect, speeches carefully vetted beforehand to ensure no one said anything that would create problems later. Elena's mother spoke about watching her daughter grow into a remarkable woman. One of Adrian's business associates talked about his integrity and vision. No one mentioned the darker realities everyone suspected, but no one acknowledged directly. As dessert was being served, Elena noticed Marcus speaking urgently into his earpiece, his expression shifting from neutral to alert. She caught Adrian's eye, tilted her head slightly in question. He noticed, too, excusing himself smoothly from the conversation with the judge who'd been explaining his views on criminal justice reform with spectacular obliviousness. Elena followed, both of them moving to where Marcus stood at the edge of the reception area. Problem? Adrian's voice was low. Possible. We've got movement at the north perimeter. 3 vehicles stopped on the access road, occupants not exiting. Could be nothing, could be surveillance. Marcus pulled up camera feeds on his phone. Want me to send a team to investigate? Do it quietly. No disruption to the reception. Adrian's hand rested at Elena's lower back, protective and possessive. Elena, you should... I'm staying right here, Elena cut him off. If something's happening, I need to know about it. Before Adrian could argue, one of the security team leaders appeared, moving fast but trying not to draw attention. Sir, the vehicles just left, but they deployed a drone before departing. Small one, camera-equipped. It circled the perimeter twice and retreated. Reconnaissance. Adrian's jaw tightened. Someone's mapping our security layout. Dmitri? Elena asked. Unlikely. The peace agreement includes provisions against this kind of surveillance. Adrian pulled out his phone, already calling someone. But someone's testing our defenses, taking note of our capabilities. Elena watched him work, making calls and issuing orders while maintaining the appearance of casual conversation. Within minutes, their security posture had shifted. Additional teams deployed to perimeter positions, drone countermeasures activated, guest screening intensified. All of it invisible to the 300 people eating dessert and drinking champagne and dancing to the orchestra that had replaced the string quartet. I need to know who sent that drone, Adrian said finally. Marcus, pull every camera feed from the access roads. Run facial recognition on anyone in those vehicles. Cross-reference against our databases. I want names within the hour. On it. Marcus disappeared to coordinate the investigation. Elena and Adrian returned to the reception, smiling and accepting congratulations while processing the threat implications. Someone had chosen their wedding day to probe for weaknesses. Whether that was opportunistic timing or deliberate provocation remained to be seen. May I have this dance? Adrian extended his hand as the orchestra began a waltz. Elena took it, letting him guide her onto the dance floor where other couples were already moving to the music. In his arms, surrounded by witnesses, they could speak freely about things no one else would hear over the music. This is a message, Elena said quietly. Someone wants us to know they're watching, that we're vulnerable. Or they're probing to see how we respond, testing whether we're distracted, whether our security has gaps. Adrian's hand at her waist was steady, his movements precise. Either way, it's a challenge we can't ignore. What do we do? We finish our wedding reception with grace and dignity. We show no concern, no fear, no awareness that anything unusual occurred. Adrian's eyes held hers. And then, tomorrow, we identify who was responsible and respond accordingly. Responded how? Elena asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. That depends on who it was and what they hoped to accomplish. Adrian spun her smoothly, the mechanics of the dance second nature to him. But I promise you this, no one threatens what we've built without consequences. The dance ended and others began. Elena found herself partnered with various guests, business associates of Adrian's, old society connections from her previous life. people who existed in the overlap between legitimate and criminal worlds. She smiled and made conversation and gathered information, filing away details about who seemed nervous, who seemed too interested in their security arrangements, who asked questions that were slightly too pointed. It was past 11 when the reception finally wound down, guests departing in carefully coordinated waves of limousines and town cars and expensive vehicles that probably cost more than the average person's annual salary. Elena and Adrian stood at the entrance, thanking people for coming, accepting final congratulations, maintaining perfect composure despite the security breach earlier. When the last guest had finally left and the staff began cleaning up, Marcus approached with his phone displaying surveillance photos. We identified the vehicles, registered to a shell corporation that traces back to Konstantin Petrov. He swiped through images showing faces Elena didn't recognize. Petrov's organization has been trying to expand into West Coast operations for the past 6 months. The drone surveillance suggests they're planning something more aggressive. Petrov. Adrian's voice was thoughtful. Not substantial enough to be a real threat on his own, but if he's working with someone else, it becomes more interesting. Run the associates, see who else might be involved. Already on it. We'll have a full report by morning. Good. Adrian turned to Elena. Let's go home. We can strategize there. The drive back to the cliffside house felt surreal after the elaborate spectacle of the wedding. Elena still wore her dress, though she'd kicked off her shoes in the car, and Adrian had loosened his bow tie, the first visible sign of relaxation she'd seen all day. Some wedding night, she said wryly. Not what you imagined, I assume. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness. I stopped imagining normal things weeks ago. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. Now I imagine security threats and strategic responses and how to protect what we've built. Is that strange? It's practical, and it's why we work. Adrian's voice was soft. Most people in this life, they keep their partners separate from the reality of what they do. Protected, innocent. But that creates distance, secrets, vulnerabilities. You and I, we don't have that problem. Because I chose to see everything, even the ugly parts. Us especially the ugly parts. Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. You're my partner in all of it. Today proved that. The way you handled the security situation, the way you read the room and gathered intelligence while making small talk, you're a natural at this. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at his approval. A month ago, she would have been horrified to be praised for skills in deception and threat assessment. Now, it felt like recognition of her value, acknowledgement of how far she'd come. Back at the house, Elena changed out of her wedding dress with Irina's help, hanging it carefully in the closet next to the engagement dress and all the other expensive clothes that had become her armor. She pulled on comfortable clothes, leggings and a soft sweater, and found Adrian in his study, still in his tuxedo pants and shirt, but with the jacket discarded and sleeves rolled up. He was reviewing security footage on multiple screens, making notes, building a picture of what had happened and who was responsible. Come here, he said without looking away from the screens. Tell me what you see. Elena moved to stand beside him, studying the drone footage that their security systems had captured. The small aircraft had circled the perimeter systematically, camera-angled to capture security positions, equipment, personnel movements. They're mapping our entire setup, she said. Not just casual observation, this is detailed reconnaissance for planning purposes. They want to know exactly how many people we have, where they're positioned, what equipment we're using. What does that tell you about their intentions? Elena thought carefully. They're planning something that requires precise knowledge of our defenses, either an assault on this location or they want to understand our capabilities so they can plan around them elsewhere. Good. Adrian pulled up different footage. Now watch this. The vehicles on the access road. Notice anything about their positioning? Elena studied the images. 3 vehicles parked at intervals, all with clear sight lines to different sections of the property. They weren't just launching the drone. They were also running direct surveillance, multiple angles, redundant coverage, which means they're thorough, well-funded, and they've done this kind of operation before. Elena felt her pulse quicken. This isn't some opportunistic move, it's professional. Exactly. Adrian minimized the footage, pulled up files on Konstantin Petrov. Which means Petrov isn't working alone. He doesn't have the resources or expertise for this level of operation. Who would he be working with? That's what we need to find out. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Marcus found something. 3 of Petrov's known associates have connections to Dmitry Volkov's organization. Elena felt ice slide through her veins. The peace agreement was signed 3 days ago and apparently means nothing. Adrian's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could hear the fury underneath. Dmitry agreed to territorial boundaries and cooperation, then immediately began planning reconnaissance operations against our primary residence. Unless he didn't authorize it, Elena said slowly. What if Alexei is making moves without his uncle's knowledge, testing whether the old man's peace agreement actually holds? Adrian considered this. It's possible. Dmitry is in his 70s. Alexei might be positioning himself to take over, establishing that he's not bound by agreements made by someone he sees as weak. Either way, we need to respond. Elena moved to the window, looking out at the ocean that was just visible in the moonlight. If we do nothing, it shows weakness, invites more aggressive action. Yes, Adrian joined her at the window, which means tomorrow we send a message that can't be misinterpreted. That surveillance of our home, our wedding, our life together, that has consequences. What kind of consequences? Adrian's smile was cold. The kind that makes everyone else think twice before testing our boundaries. They spent the next hour planning, building a response that was proportional but devastating. Not an attack on Dmitry directly, that would violate the peace agreement and trigger full-scale war. But Petrov and his associates, the ones who'd actually conducted the surveillance, they were fair targets. We hit 3 of his operations simultaneously, Adrian explained, pointing to locations on a map. The shipping warehouse where he stores merchandise that should have been taxed. The restaurant he uses for money laundering. And his primary office where he runs his legitimate construction business. We don't destroy them. We just make it clear we know exactly where they are and could destroy them anytime we choose. A warning, Elena understood. Proportional response that demonstrates capability without triggering escalation. Exactly, and we make sure Dmitry knows that his nephew's people were involved. Let him deal with the internal politics of whether Alexei is undermining his authority. It was elegant and brutal, the kind of strategic response that solved immediate problems while creating longer-term advantages. Elena watched Adrian coordinate everything, calls to his security teams, instructions to his intelligence network, careful planning of timing and execution. This was who he was. Not the man in the tuxedo at their wedding, but this, the strategist who saw 10 moves ahead and played chess with human lives. And Elena found herself not repulsed but fascinated, contributing ideas and identifying vulnerabilities in the plan until it was refined to near perfection. By 2 a.m, everything was set. The operations would execute at dawn, coordinated to the minute, sending a message that would be received clearly by everyone who mattered. Come to bed, Adrian said finally, closing his laptop. We've done everything we can for tonight. His bedroom was at the far end of the house, overlooking the ocean from floor-to-ceiling windows. Elena had never been inside before. They'd maintained the fiction of separate spaces even as their partnership deepened. But tonight was different. Tonight they were actually married, and whatever came next would happen together. The room was surprisingly simple for someone with Adrian's resources. A massive bed, minimal furniture, shelves of books in multiple languages. Personal in a way the rest of the house wasn't. This is where you really live, Elena said, running her hand along the bookshelf. Russian literature, history, philosophy, military strategy. The education of someone who'd taught himself everything he needed to survive and thrive. This is where I think. Adrian moved to stand behind her. Where I plan. Where I process everything that happens in the world outside. And now I'm here. Elena turned to face him. In your private space, seeing the parts you don't show anyone else. Yes. Adrian's hand settled at her waist. Because you're my wife now, my partner in everything. Which means no more walls, no more separate spaces, no more parts of my life you don't see. Elena reached up, loosening his collar further, studying the face she'd learned to read over the past month. I'm not who I was when we met. Neither am I. Adrian's voice was soft. You've changed me too. Made me want things I thought were too dangerous. Partnership. Trust. Someone who sees all of me and chooses to stay anyway. I do choose it. Elena's hand slid to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palms. Every day, even when it's hard, even when I watch you order consequences for people who cross you, even when I have to become someone harder than I ever imagined, I choose this. I choose you. When Adrian kissed her, it wasn't like the chaste kiss at their wedding ceremony. This was real and raw and absolutely private. No performance for witnesses, just two people who'd found each other in darkness and decided to build something together. They fell into bed tangled together, wedding night finally claiming its traditional purposes, though nothing about them was traditional. Between kisses and touches and the kind of intimacy that came from truly knowing someone, they talked about the future they were building, the empire they'd expand, the threats they'd neutralize, the power they'd consolidate. Eventually, they slept, wrapped around each other while security teams patrolled outside and the ocean crashed against cliffs and the world spun on, indifferent to the empire being forged in this bedroom. Elena woke at dawn to find Adrian already dressed, standing at the window with his phone pressed to his ear, issuing final instructions for the morning's operations. She watched him work, this man who'd bought her freedom, and somehow given her more power than she'd ever had as a Whitmore. "It's done," he said finally, ending the call and turning to face her. Petrov's operations were hit simultaneously 15 minutes ago. No casualties, but extensive property damage. Security footage was left showing our people entering and leaving. The message is clear. How will he respond? He'll run to Dmitry claiming we violated the peace agreement. Dmitry will review the evidence, see that his nephew's people conducted surveillance of our wedding, and make Alexei handle the political fallout. Adrian moved to sit beside her on the bed. By this afternoon, we'll receive either a formal apology or a declaration of war. I'm betting on the apology. And if you're wrong, then we go to war. Adrian said it simply. But we'll win. We always do. The confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the certainty of someone who'd survived everything the world threw at him and come out stronger every time. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. She read it, then showed Adrian the screen. Dmitry wants a call. Private. In the next hour. Right on schedule. Adrian pulled out his own phone, dialing. When Dmitry answered, Adrian put it on speaker so Elena could hear. "You have a problem." Dmitry's voice was harsh. "Alexei's people conducting unauthorized surveillance at your wedding. I found out this morning when Petrov came crying about your retaliation. My nephew exceeded his authority. So you're aware of what happened." "I'm aware my nephew is an ambitious idiot who thought he could make moves without my knowledge. He was wrong." There was a pause, background noise suggesting Dmitry was somewhere less than private. "The peace agreement stands. Alexei is being educated about the importance of honoring commitments I make." "Good." Adrian's voice was neutral. "And Petrov? Is lucky to be alive. I'm sending him back to the East Coast where I can watch him personally. His operations here are finished." Another pause. "I apologize for my nephew's actions. They don't represent my intentions or our agreement. Apology accepted." Adrian met Elena's eyes while speaking to Dmitry. "But understand, next time someone in your organization tests our boundaries, the response will be more severe. I protected our agreement by limiting retaliation to Petrov. Next time, I won't be so restrained." "Understood." "And Adrian, your wife, Elena, she was right about me being tired. The old ways, the constant fighting, it's exhausting. I meant what I said about peace. Make sure your people understand that." "I will. And Dmitry, control your nephew, or I'll do it for you." Adrian ended the call and pulled Elena into his arms. There. War avoided, respect maintained, boundaries reinforced. A successful resolution. "You sound surprised." "I'm always surprised when people choose sense over pride." Adrian kissed her forehead. "But we did it. Protected what we've built while showing strength. That's the balance we'll need to maintain going forward." The weeks that followed established new patterns. Elena took a more visible role in Adrian's operations, attending meetings, contributing strategy, making decisions that affected hundreds of people. The organization learned quickly that she wasn't decoration or distraction. She was a genuine partner with authority equal to Adrian's. She also began her own projects. Using the trust fund Adrian had established, She created a foundation that provided housing, job training, and support services to people trying to escape poverty and violence. It was legitimate, well-funded, and carefully designed to help people like the teenage Adrian had been, desperate and alone and needing a chance. "You're building the life you wish someone had built for you," Elena said one evening, watching Adrian review grant proposals for the foundation. "Maybe." Adrian signed approval on 3 applications. "Or I'm making sure the empire we're building has purpose beyond just accumulating power. What's the point of all this if we can't use it to actually help people?" It was that complexity that Elena loved most about him, the man who could order death without hesitation and also fund housing for families with nowhere else to go. The villain who was also sometimes a hero, depending on which angle you viewed him from. 6 months into their marriage, Elena was in the security center reviewing footage when she noticed something unusual. A woman, mid-20s, standing at the outer gates, pressing the intercom repeatedly, despite security telling her to leave. "Who is that?" Elena asked the security officer monitoring the cameras. "No idea. She's been there for 20 minutes. Won't give her name, just says she needs to speak to Mrs. Volkov urgently." Something about the woman's body language, the desperation, the fear barely contained, made Elena pay attention. "Bring her inside. Secure room. I'll talk to her." The woman was terrified when Elena entered the interview room, her hands shaking, her eyes darting to the exits like she expected violence at any moment. "I'm Elena Volkov." Elena kept her voice gentle. "You asked for me specifically. Why?" "Because you're the only one who might understand." The woman's voice cracked. "I'm Sarah Chen. My father was Marcus Chen." Elena's breath caught. Marcus Chen, the man from Adrian's shipping operations, one of the 3 who'd been caught stealing and blackmailed into loyalty. "He died 2 weeks ago," Sarah continued. "Heart attack," they said. "But I found things in his office, documents about shipments, about money, about working for your husband, and I think someone killed him because he knew too much." Elena studied Sarah carefully. The fear was genuine, but was the accusation? Adrian had promised Marcus safety in exchange for loyalty. If Marcus had been killed, it violated everything they'd built. "Why come to me instead of the police?" Elena asked. "Because if I'm right, the police won't help. Your husband owns half of them. But you—" Sarah's eyes held desperate hope. "People say you're different, that you actually care about doing things right. So I'm asking you, was my father murdered? And if he was, will you help me find out who did it?" Elena made a decision that would have been impossible a year ago, unthinkable even months ago. "Stay here. I'll investigate. And if your father was killed, I promise you'll get answers." She found Adrian in his study, interrupted a call about shipping contracts, and laid out Sarah Chen's accusations with clinical precision. "Marcus Chen died of a heart attack," Adrian said when she finished. "Natural causes, verified by the coroner. I had no reason to have him killed. He'd been performing well, providing useful intelligence. His death was unfortunate, but not suspicious." "Then let me investigate. Prove it to her." Elena's voice was firm. "If we want loyalty from our people, they need to know we protect them, that we investigate when something seems wrong. Otherwise, every unexplained death becomes a reason to fear us." Adrian considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right, full investigation. Access to all the security footage, medical records, everything. Find out what happened to Marcus Chen. And Elena? If someone in our organization did kill him without authorization, handle it however you see fit." It took Elena 3 days of reviewing records, interviewing people, and following leads. What she found was both better and worse than murder. Marcus Chen had indeed died of a heart attack, but the stress that triggered it came from threats. Not from Adrian's organization, but from his ex-wife, who'd been blackmailing him for additional child support by threatening to expose his work for Adrian to federal investigators. The ex-wife had no idea what she was actually threatening to expose, thought Marcus was just working for a successful businessman. But Marcus had panicked, the stress had accumulated, and his heart had given out. Elena brought Sarah into Adrian's study, explained everything with documentation to support it, and watched the young woman process the complicated truth. "Your father wasn't murdered," Elena said gently. "But he was killed by the stress of trying to protect you and your siblings from consequences of his past choices. He died trying to be a good father." Sarah cried then, messy and real, grieving both her father and the simple narrative she'd needed to make sense of his death. Elena sat with her through it, understanding that grief for complicated men who'd made terrible choices but loved their families anyway. When Sarah finally left with enough money to finish school and support her siblings, Adrian looked at Elena with something close to wonder. "You could have had her disappeared, eliminated the threat she represented," he said. "She wasn't a threat. She was a daughter looking for answers about her father's death." Elena moved to stand beside him at the window. "We're building something here, Adrian. An empire, yes, but also a reputation. I want people to know that we're ruthless when necessary but fair when possible, that we protect our own and investigate before assuming guilt." "You're making me better." Adrian's arms came around her from behind. "Making this empire better. More than just power and profit. Something with actual purpose." "We're making each other better," Elena corrected, leaning back against his chest. "You taught me how to survive in this world. I'm teaching you how to build something worth surviving for." The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of challenges met and threats neutralized and power consolidated. Elena transformed from Adrian's partner to an equal force in her own right, respected and feared by people who'd initially dismissed her as a society girl playing at being a criminal's wife. She learned to shoot, to fight, to negotiate with people who only understood strength. She built networks of her own, connections that complemented Adrian's rather than duplicating them. She became the person who made hard decisions and lived with the consequences. And somewhere in all of that, the strategic partnership they'd begun with transformed into something deeper. Love, maybe, though neither of them was entirely comfortable with that word. It felt too simple for what they'd built, a connection forged in darkness and danger and absolute trust that the other person would always choose the partnership over personal comfort. One evening, exactly 1 year after their wedding, they stood on the terrace of their home watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of fire and gold. Elena wore the key necklace she never took off, symbol of the choice she made every day to stay. "Do you regret it?" Adrian asked quietly. "Giving up Paris and art school and the normal life you could have had?" Elena thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, scared and angry and helpless, watching her future get traded away by her father. Then she thought about the woman she'd become, powerful and capable and absolutely certain of her place in the world. "I regret nothing," she said firmly. "That life would have been smaller, safer maybe, but smaller. This," she gestured to the empire spread below them, the city lights beginning to glow as darkness fell. "This is everything I never knew I wanted: power, purpose, partnership with someone who sees me as an equal. Even with all the darkness, the violence, the moral complexity. Especially with all that." Elena turned to face him. "Because I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. I'm not playing at being civilized while doing corrupt things behind closed doors. I'm exactly what I appear to be, someone who understands how power works and uses it deliberately. That honesty is worth more than any false innocence." Adrian pulled her close, kissed her with the kind of passion that had grown between them over a year of truly knowing each other. "Then let's build more. Let's expand the empire and the foundation and everything we're creating. Let's show them all what a real partnership can accomplish." "Yes," Elena smiled against his lips. "Let's build a kingdom." And they did. Over the years that followed, Adrian and Elena Volkov became legendary, feared for their ruthlessness, respected for their fairness, admired for the empire they built that balanced profit with purpose. They expanded operations across the West Coast and eventually beyond, always careful to maintain the balance between legitimate business and shadow work. The foundation Elena created helped thousands of people escape poverty and violence, giving them the chances Adrian never had as a teenager. It became her legacy, the proof that power could be used for something beyond just accumulating more power. They faced threats and survived them, enemies who tested their boundaries and learned painful lessons about the cost of challenging the Volkovs. Opportunities that required hard choices and moral complexity, and the willingness to do difficult things for strategic advantage. Through it all, they remained partners, equal in authority, complementary in strength, absolutely united in purpose. The marriage that began as a transaction transformed into the foundation of an empire, proof that sometimes the most powerful alliances come from the most unexpected places. Elena never returned to art school, never studied in Paris or Florence, or any of the places she'd once dreamed about. But she didn't mourn those lost dreams because the reality she'd built was so much bigger, so much more substantial than anything she could have imagined at 20. She'd been sold to save her father's political career, but she'd taken that violation and transformed it into power, choosing to stay not because she was trapped, but because she'd found exactly where she belonged, beside the most dangerous man in the city, building an empire that would last long after they were gone, living a life that was complex and difficult and absolutely authentic. And every morning when Elena woke in Adrian's arms, the key necklace still around her neck, she made the same choice she'd made a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. She chose to stay. She chose partnership over safety. She chose power over innocence. She chose herself, the woman she'd become, the queen she was always meant to be. And that choice made all the difference.